welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and we are reading the Philosophical Midwifery book, sometimes called the Orange Sutra. Sutra is name of a spiritual text, so it is a spiritual yoga that uses the same logos and dialectic that we are reading about in our other series, our other read-alongs. But it's the spiritual yoga of understanding problems, using the logos and dialectic to uncover, understand, remove, and free ourselves from our problems. So, what an interesting spiritual tradition. Now, very different from a lot of other spiritual traditions, which don't have a logos, don't use the logos as their method, but also that don't really tackle problems, giving us the very well-known situations of people in various different spiritual traditions, you name them, with people high-ranking within their system, notorious for crimes and playing out their problems using whatever power or authority or spiritual ability to play out their problems. The drunken sage and the pervy sage being archetypes that we see in anime. But what we are doing here is the opposite. Using the logos and the dialectic as a spiritual tradition, specifically focused on uncovering problems, which also makes it the only form of psychotherapy that has been empirically verified. The verification studies are in the back of the text that we're reading, but as we are reading the introduction, that is a puzzle. Is this psychotherapy or is it philosophy? And if it's that which is needed to solve problems, can we say that therefore this should be the domain of philosophy? Or is it psychotherapy that just happens to use the principles of philosophy? That's a question that Pierre Grimes has himself in where we are reading. And the fact that whether it's psychology using the philosophical principles of the logos and dialectic, or whether philosophy itself is a healing tradition, either way, as we read, we are also learning about the logos. So the other series that we are recording and streaming at the moment, how do we discover the logos of, the paradigm, to discover the highest reaches of the mind, the highest levels of reality, to know thyself. That's why we read Plato, why we read about Socrates, recorded by Plato. And also we are discovering the logos of music in that series. And here is the triad of philosophical midwifery. And as we read, we're discovering the logos that we can use to gain insights in the other two as we go. Now, if you are somebody who's only interested in solving problems, you may not be interested in understanding music or using music as a way of discovering the logos. You may not be interested in discovering the truth of the self, reality, mind, being, all those sorts of things, virtue, excellence. Maybe you just want to free yourself from problems. Well, you're still going to be learning the logos anyway. Now, what might end up happening is with the freedom that the removal of problems affords you, you might have some questions. What do I do with this freedom? After all, being healthy doesn't make you the most fit physical body. In other words, going from sickness to health with your physical body doesn't necessarily make you in peak physical condition. Equally so, having removed yourself from problems doesn't mean you know everything or you know wisdom. It might allow you the freedom to use your life energy more fully to pursue wisdom. So that's one of the reasons why philosophy and philosophical midwifery go together. So let's jump into the text and keep reading. We are in the introduction, where it all began. Here we are. So, where we left off last time. The forming of the Noetic Society. People who were going to Pierre Grimes to gain help with freeing themselves from their problems. They formed a society where they would learn how to do it themselves. I think already Pierre has been, has he been given the Dharma stick? The Dharma stick is the stick that's given to the next in line to be the head figure within the Buddhist tradition. I think there are 8 major forms of Buddhist tradition, and during Pierre's life, because of what we're reading, he was given the Dharma stick to one of them. We're not there yet. So he's discovering that what he found out helping alcoholics in their problems was also he was using them in his meditation at the Zen Center in Los Angeles, unblocking them from what was preventing them from having enlightenment experiences on the mat. He recognized he had a problem. He failed to grasp the obvious fact that what he was doing was actually essential to Zen practice. So he discovered something that was lacking formally within Zen Buddhism, and he was doing it. And it wasn't just a bonus, it's actually essential. And you can wonder about why that might be. Why might it be that understanding the cause of the problems people have with their meditation is essential to their success in meditation? Could it be the same reason that we just said, well, we talk about with philosophy? In order to reach the goals we have in philosophy, we also have to be doing philosophical midwifery. Every meaningful goal has blocks because that's part of being human. So we say it's complementary, or philosophical midwifery is pretty much essential for our work in philosophy or learning music, learning the logos of music. So too for anything that's a meaningful goal that we have, like Zen Buddhism. So the implications of this problem: he failed to take responsibility for his own seeing and sharing it. So we are sharing your understanding and your insights as part of what we do in the philosophical journey. And we must be sure not to diminish our own seeing. And what's curious about seeing is we see through our understanding. In other words, it's obvious. So as it was for Pierre, sometimes it can be a surprise to recognize, well, to hear feedback from others that what seems obvious and normal to you is amazing, what exceptional. He used certain words here. Profound. He used particular words to talk about what surprised him. Unusual, here we go. Unusual and exceptional. Because it's just the way you see things. Once you have developed your understanding to a certain level of seeing. So the logos, as a development of understanding, accompanies certain states of being. So it's both an understanding and spiritual or psychical practice. Equally so, it would apply to our blocks. If our blocks are caused by certain false beliefs that we just see through, we think are real, then it might be a shock to find that your false beliefs are unusual and exceptional to others. In one of our recent philosophy talks, we had someone who had a view that there is no such thing as being, which is strange for him to be in a philosophy stream, but that was his opinion. And it might have been strange and unusual to discover that that view is odd. It's just the way he sees. As a result of understanding the spirit to be only physical, he also was carrying certain beliefs about physical causes to psychic excellence. Hello, welcome to the chat, first time chatter. Hope you enjoy. Thank you for the follow. So that without realizing that there's a realm of being or soul, in our reading of the Meno, which is Meno asking Socrates, how do we get the excellence of soul, the virtue of soul, the best way that we can be? He had opinions that, it's to do with physical things, physical characteristics, your skin color, your level of testosterone, physical things. Now, those of us familiar enough with reason and evidence, and those of us familiar enough with the soul being non-physical by definition, that's what makes it metaphysics. It's beyond physics, or spiritual, meaning of the spirit, can very easily recognize that as a racist belief or prejudiced belief. But if he sees through it, then it can be surprising that other people think that way. Just as the author of this book that we're reading found it surprising, that others found his clear seeing and high level of functioning to be able to, through dialogue, help free people from their blocks to high spiritual experiences. That was unusual to other people, and because it's just the way he saw things, it was surprising to him. So either your high level of development in philosophy or your particular problem that we address in philosophical midwifery, the way you see is the way you see. You see through your false beliefs that you think are real. You see through your understanding in philosophy that is true. So we have to keep that in mind so we can approach both ends of the spectrum with fairness. Now, how do you address somebody who just sees the world in a racist way? Simply saying your beliefs are wrong is not going to help anything. That's where philosophical midwifery comes in. Can we identify the root cause of the false beliefs that result in racist opinions, that further function to keep you trapped within a low level of functioning with your friends or with others, block you from development towards your goals? Equally so, we were reading here, Pierre Grimes found it surprising that others found his natural way of seeing exceptional. And as a result, he failed to grasp the obvious fact that what he was doing was actually essential to Zen and also to other spiritual traditions as well. Understanding the nature of midwifery, we could say, well, of course, that's obvious. Every spiritual tradition, everything that's meaningful requires philosophical midwifery. Simply because it's a principle. As you seek your more meaningful goals, you will have blocks. They either play out or you find ways of hiding them, or you address them, or you give up your goals, of course. So, as a result of his failure to take on responsibility for his own seeing, he failed to share it with those whose experiences and judgment would most appreciate this curious and obvious for him kind of Buddhism he was practicing. He then in 82 came across Chon An, a Korean Buddhist who knew how profound the obvious was. So one of the few who could recognize what the significance of what he was doing. Then in 1972, he formed the Noetic Society. The goal was to study the wisdom traditions, and particularly the study of dialogue, which we call dialectic in this channel. The paradigm of good dialogue. Knowing I was a philosophical midwife, some members asked me to guide them through their problems that they were having in their philosophical quest. An example of a high goal, need midwifery. Then what it took them 5 years for them to realize it might be worth learning themselves. So they incorporated under the laws of California to make the Noetic Society and start a philosophical midwifery program for Noetic Society members. Hooray. The noblest game. In doing that, he was taught that he learned that simple things that run deep are not necessarily easily learned. Participants learn to recognize how the logos functions. That's what we're after on this channel. What's the logos? How do we master it? Beliefs can permeate their lives. Dialogues explore the personal level of their lives. Not only personally meaningful, but involve universal themes. So, we personally benefit, but in each of these dialogues, there'll be a universal theme that can apply to everyone. Meaning, the midwife will be able to gain insights into the principles that he himself function under. And in the hundreds or thousands of midwife talks that I have been around in my time, it almost always is the case that everyone else there is like, wow, it felt like it personally applied to me, even though I wasn't the person talking about their particular problem. Universal. Okay, some things can be taught. The difference. Some things can be taught. One of the questions we are reading the Meno. Meno asks Socrates, can the excellence of the soul be taught? Can virtue be taught? We're exploring that. Some things you can only learn by removing the blocks to your own seeing. So you're not learning something, you're just removing the things in the way to a natural state of being, which is curious. Two kinds of learning. Midwifery made appeal simple. There are few masters of it. So hopefully that's something we can remedy. Maybe we can work together in adding more masters of what's so essential and simple into our world. Hopefully, hey, maybe one day we'll have a midwife in every house, a midwife on every street corner, doing midwifery in every classroom before lunchtime. Those with more proficiency gained it by an uncommon commitment to personal excellence. Very important. We seek our highest goals. We seek to use our highest vision. We seek to use our highest understanding. And whatever we do, we seek to do it with excellence. This is uncommon, but maybe necessary. Platonic philosophy uses midwifery as it proceeds, but it is the systematic question and probing for adequate answers that takes the lead. Okay, our quest, well, the spiritual quest to know reality and self, that's Platonic philosophy, but it uses midwifery as it goes along. Both use a systematic questioning and probing for adequate answers that we call dialectic. Takes the lead. To reach the highest goal, what's our goals? Having a mind free of delusion, expressing itself through a logos, and being able to express it with integrity and a mindfulness free of folly. Wow. Wow. What a goal that we have here. This aspect takes on a meditative or contemplative turn. So in this, participating in the dialectic, which is what? Systematic questioning and judging of answers, to reach a mind free of delusion, free of folly, and expressing itself through logos.
Wow.
With integrity, it's a kind of virtue, and mindfulness.
Wow.
Mindfulness is. So that practice becomes a kind of meditation or contemplation. The difficulties encountered in meditation are the same dynamics as the pathologos problem. So, same thing he was helping people to get through in his work, his Zen experiences, Zen center experiences. Same dynamic. To philosophy, to pathologos problems. Resolved by exploratory talks. He conducted meditation retreats. So they had meditation followed by open exploratory discussions of the problems that people had during their meditation. That's the kind of meditation I would like to go to. Back in the day, I've been to many different meditation places and they mainly stunk. Mainly because they lack this. Kind of like left on your own. No one really knows how to solve problems and it's kind of just luck whether you have an experience or whatever. They have nice advice sometimes and they have a formula they follow, whatever place you go to. But there's no open reflection and understanding of the kinds of blocks that came up, and also no understanding of how to remove them. So you kind of just left to yourself and often made to feel bad if you don't have a good experience. And a lot of in-group, out-group dynamics that you can see in other places. You don't really love our tradition. You're not as good as us. Or maybe you didn't breathe hard enough, or maybe you didn't focus hard enough, or maybe you didn't really want to be it. The same kind of stuff that is used to reject questions and inquiry from people within religious traditions. Multi-level marketing scams, same thing. To strengthen the in-group mentality. I guess you don't quite get it, do you? Maybe if you believed hard enough. Maybe if you had a grind set. If you had a Sigma grind set, we would say nowadays. Nonsense, of course. If we have blocks, why not talk about them, understand them, and in doing so become free of them? Well, the reason why not is this guy, Pierre Grimes, had to rediscover that problems are understandable. And the other people who we look to solve problems, he met and realized they're dropping the ball. Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, Alan Watts, L. Ron Hubbard, Albert Ellis, I think he mentioned. Albert Ellis and Jung, these are people who are taught at university, people who want to study psychology or psychotherapy. And they dropped the ball. They didn't pick up the logos. They're doing something else that might be interesting for people within that tradition, but doesn't get to the cause and nature of problems. So that's why one reason why it's not done. But thankfully, this dude ran into all these people like Forrest Gump or somebody in the chat said it's like Luffy for spirituality. Luffy, an anime character who seems to run in all of the key figures. There are lots of animes like that. The main character seems to live a life where he befriends the people with the greatest ability in the world in different areas. So he was having a different kind of retreat where you do the meditation and you reflect on the problems. On reflection, we should have expected that midwifery would play a role there too, since we know that as one approaches states of mind or experiences perceived as beneficial to oneself, problems are experienced, right? So anything that's involved in something that changes your state of mind, so any spiritual tradition or any experiences that are beneficial, which is pretty much all activities we take on as human beings, we do so because we perceive they will change our state of mind to make us happier, and we will get a benefit from doing so. Get that promotion or get that degree or get that whatever. Then problems are experienced. So if you are a living human being, this philosophical midwifery is essential. Indeed, to be able to both experience profound states of mind and maintain them. So this is the reason why what we just said is true. To have them, experience them, and maintain them threatens the existence of problems. Makes sense? Thank you for the follow on YouTube. Right, if you have a problem, no one listens to me, but you have an experience where everybody in your office is listening to you, then you can't keep both. You can't keep the problematic belief and the experience. So maybe you'll tell yourself, oh, they were just tricking me. They were all laughing at me. I could never be the manager of the office. Or you have to give up the problem. So having the experience and maintaining it, now that's just a small example that's easy to see. Really, we're interested in the highest experiences of reality itself or self itself, and maintaining that state of wisdom or enlightenment or whatever language you prefer to use. Okay, that's where we're up to. Let's keep reading. As we keep reading, let me make sure that I've got my highlighter open. Okie smoky. In the meditation retreats I conducted, I shifted from a formal meditation practice that focused on breathing and koan practice, so he shifted to what became a platonic meditation practice. Interesting. Personally, I'm not a fan of koans. Koans are questions that an authority figure gives you, like a guru gives you, that can't be answered logically, or are trick questions, like what is the sound of one hand clapping? So you're supposed to focus on it and become curious about it, and you can't leave the question because you can't answer it. So it maintains that open, curious state of mind that's necessary for insight, which is needed for meditation. I don't like that because it seems phony, seems fake. I don't really care about what is mu. I don't really care about the sound of one hand clapping. And as soon as I know there's a trick question, I'm not wasting my time on your bubblegum question. It's not really nutritious, it's bubblegum. Also, in what we are learning in midwifery and what we're learning in philosophy, we don't need it. We have a question we're naturally curious about that we pursue in philosophy. What is reality, or what is the self? What is the meaning of life? You're naturally interested in that. And you're naturally curious about it until you have those enlightenment experiences to verify what you're understanding and you're learning in these podcast series, in our reading of Plato. Equally so, we naturally have a question about our problems. Why do I always have this problem? Why does it always come up? Why can I not have the money or the girlfriend or the enlightenment experience? Why can I not? Why do I get distracted from my reading of Plato, even though I know it's the most important thing we can do here? So we're naturally interested in a question of our problem and a question of our highest goal that we will stay curious about until we're free from it, or we experience the higher levels. So we don't need a fake question to keep us open until we have an experience, because we are naturally curious about the real questions about the experience and what blocks us from it. That's why I don't like koan practice. Bubblegum. This shift had the effect of surfacing more significant experiences among meditators. Well, that's good to hear, that changing from that old tradition without logos had the effect of surfacing more significant experiences, bringing them to insights and understandings of the self. That's what we were talking about. Okay, so that's an even better way of saying it. The questions we have that in philosophy are essentially about understanding and having insights or deeper experiences of the self. That's a better way of saying it. And the other kind of question that every human gets, we get one and two, is, hey, what's the false belief about the self? The false experience and understanding of the self that's blocking me from the true one. Makes it more simple. Understand and insight into the self. And two kinds of questions, the true and the false. And you can't carry both. You can't be, if your goal is to understand and have insights into being an electrical engineer. That's your goal. That's why you're studying electrical engineering at college. That's the high question, question one. Question two is, well, you can't have that understanding and insight if you are also carrying the false belief that electricity is caused by magic pixies that are invisible and need to be fed cheese to make them happy. You can't have both. You can't have the false belief about the thing that you are also seeking true understanding and experience of that same thing. Otherwise, you'll go to class and you'll just cover all your electrical wirings in cheese to hope that it will appease the pixies. And then they'll just cause an electrical fire and you won't be able to get your diploma in electrical engineering. And you'll have to sacrifice your goal because of what you're carrying that's false. Or you uncover and sacrifice what's false so you can reach your goal. Very, very simple. And if our goal in philosophy is to know, understand, experience, have the highest insight about the self, then we also have to be doing midwifery to discover what we're carrying that's contrary to that. And if you're familiar with the problems that you have, you might recognize that, hey, when I'm having the problems, I have this kind of inner dialogue that says that myself stinks. I'm not good enough. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not cool enough. I'm not wise enough. I'm not educated enough. So if what we're discovering about the self in philosophy is it's the ultimate, it's the highest, it's the most profound, it's the most meaningful, even beyond the demiurgos or the creator God, the self is even beyond that, beyond the divine, then anything that diminishes yourself is by definition going to be a false. You can't have the ultimate of self and a belief of yourself being less, inadequate, diminished, not good enough. Right? And even before we reach the self in philosophy, the experience of being is sometimes called beauty itself. Self beauty. So if you are in the presence of a beautiful person and you think, oh, I'm not good enough to be around this beautiful person, that's a view of yourself being less than beauty or less than good enough for beauty. Well, if you can't be around a beautiful person, how can you completely join with beauty itself in the experience, the insight of pure being, the idea of the self, the experience of the self? If that's ultimate beauty and the cause of all beautiful other things like beautiful people, then if you're not good enough for the little beauties, how can you be good enough for beauty itself? So all of the little problems we address along the way allow us to reach higher and higher levels of beauty or meaning or insights and understanding, leading to the ultimate experience of beauty in the idea of the self or being or the divine. Of course, the idea or experience of the self isn't the self, so we even need to go beyond that. But that's a different question for philosophy. So, very simple. No need for koans because we have questions about the true nature of the self and what we have that says our self is inadequate. Because we can't have both. You got to pick one. And as we were reading about in the Phaedo, Socrates says, hey, how many times do you want to suffer and have ups and downs experiences in this life and in the afterworld before reincarnating, forgetting everything you learned, having more negative experience and suffering? How many times do you want to go through that before you actually, do what you're here to do and do those two things? Discover the truth about self and remove what's false so you're not stuck in the prison of reincarnation, and within your current life, not stuck within the chains of your ignorance and your problems. When do you want to do it? And why not at all times? So that's an interesting question that Socrates asked us in our reading of the Phaedo that you can find on this channel. So shifting his meditation practice surfaced more significant experiences and also brought them to insights and understanding of the self. This opened the opportunity for higher states of mind to emerge. What we're after. I asked participants to use as their meditation Proculus's. Okay. So here is a kind of thing he focused on instead of breathing and koans. Okay, I asked them to focus on the 13th. Wait, that's not the right color. I pressed this one. Where's this one? There we go. Focus on Proculus's 13th proposition in his Elements of Theology. Excuse me. So this tells me that we should be reading Proculus's Elements of Theology at some stage on this channel. So put it on our to-do list. This proposition demonstrates that the good, let's use a different color. Let's go here. Demonstrates that the good and the one are identical. What?
Wow. Wow. Wow.
What? What?
What? Now, the good. Not the idea, or the idea in Greek means behold. It's the metaphysical experience of that realm of being that we've been talking about. That's the eidos, or idea. Eidos. Let's say eidos. That's the eidos, or the experience of it. But we're not after the experience of it. We're after the thing itself. So the good and the one are identical. All right. The first hypothesis of Parmenides we have on this channel, which talks about the one as a way of understanding the self. So if we want the highest understanding of the self and experience and state of mind of the self, then Socrates' teacher Parmenides say, hey, I'm going to do a dialectic on the self using the one. Because I think the self, the highest self, is the one self. But the 13th proposition of Proculus demonstrates that the good and the one are identical. So in Plato's Republic, Socrates talks a lot about the one self. The good self in the Republic. The one self is explored in Parmenides. Of course, in the Republic, he says, maybe I don't have time to go into it now, so I'll take the next one down. The experience of the good in being. Okay, not our physical world of becoming. We have to turn our consciousness, or the eye of the soul, or ousia, around to experience it directly. And if we move our attention away from the physical senses and the physical world to experience consciousness directly, then we can experience the realm of being. That's called the idea of the good. So everything we seek because we think it's good. Everything we do as human beings is to reach this. Whether we know it or not, this is the goal of the video game we're all in. And philosophy is nothing other than realizing that and learning how to play the game that you're in anyway. So, Republic, he says, hey, I'm not going to talk about the good itself or the self-good, but the experience of the good in being. So that's a question. What does that mean? Maybe he's giving us work to do. Anyway. Later, the fundamental question of Plato's Republic was added. What, after all, is the one in itself? Now, this particular book that we're reading here was written in... this particular book was written in... I don't have it when it was written. Oh, bugger. Okay. So, I've got it on my desk. Well, Alan Watts did a forward for it. That's cool. Okay. Copyright 1998. Really? Is that when it was written? I thought it was before that. Huh. Well, anyway, since 1998, we, Pierre and the Noetic Society has developed a better translation of the Republic that's more accurate to the actual Greek. And the word that we just read in Plato's Republic, in his the studies for what it means to become a philosopher king. The first study is arithmetic, which is not the way we think of arithmetic. It's this question: what, after all, is the one self? Previously, in other translations, it's translated as the one in itself. Like, what is one? Just one. Not one as an adjective, one relating to something, one thing, one dog, one turtle. But what is one just itself? That's not a bad definition, but it's important to rename. Right, not the monad. The monad probably would be more akin to the experience of the one. So this might be closer to what's called the henad. Now, we know, those watching, henads and monads are the language that Proclus uses. You don't have to know what it means. I'm just responding to somebody in chat here. So the word self is more accurate. So in the 25 years since the book this book was written, we've had the Balboa translation with the more accurate Greek, which is what we read, thankfully, on our series, on our channel. And so we would read that when we get to the section of arithmetic, the training for the state of being or state of mind, the highest, one of the highest states of mind of the philosopher king. You need to, a kind of koan, I suppose. What, after all, is the one self, is the Greek. But what, after all, is the one in itself isn't too bad. Perhaps we should throw the Socratic Greeks in the bin. It would be a good for outhouse. You'd have to make a case for that. And if you wanted to throw out Socrates and the Logos, it would have to be an amazing case, and I'd have to wonder why you'd be in this chat to begin with. Because to be learning, you have to trust that there is a Logos. If you don't think that reality is understandable, then why seek to understand it? If you're convinced that you can't understand anything, then stay there, get stuck. You can't learn anything more because that you are convinced, because of the fact you're convinced. Socrates makes this clear in the Phaedo, and so does his teacher in the Parmenides. Hey, you've got to allow for there to be a being to exist to begin your quest. This is live, but I do record it and I put it up on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, Adam. Right, so to begin the quest to understand what being or reality itself is, you have to allow it to exist. Then you develop a trust in, for good reason, not faith, reasons to trust Socrates. Just like if you wanted to become a master mechanic, you have to have reasons for trusting the person you become an apprentice of. Can he demonstrate an understanding and an experience and a skillful use of fixing cars, just as Socrates does in his dialectics, but applied to the Logos, the understandable system of reality, the journey towards being. And then from trust, you have to pull out the key terms, pull out the puzzles, arrange them together in a kind of system that he is calling a dialogue here, but we call it the dialectic. That gives you a kind of understanding. You see how and why the pieces fit. Just like you ask your, you can't just spend your whole life believing or trusting the master mechanic as an apprentice. You have to take the pieces that you get from him and you remember from him and arrange the parts within a system of understanding to know how and why it works the way it does. Of course, that's not the end of it. You have to put that into experience to prove what you have understood. In philosophy, that's the transition from dianoia, which is understanding being, to experiencing it. That's one of the high states of mind that people in these different spiritual traditions that we've been talking about. That's the goal of Zen Buddhism and the different Hindu traditions and Chinese traditions that we have been reading, that Socrates studied with and lectured with at the College of Comparative, what's it called? Alan Watts. Academy of Asian Studies. Yes, Chinese philosophy, Hindu philosophy. There are many spiritual traditions that have as their goal the experience of being. Only philosophy is like an apprentice. You get there through understanding. That's the Logos and dialectic. That's what makes philosophy different. Different from other spiritual traditions, and also different from other academic traditions that just use logic. They don't go beyond the physical world. So of course, we're not interested in that, as in our author is not interested in that. Otherwise, he wouldn't be spending his time lecturing and learning from these people and going to the Zen Center and helping people with having those experiences in their Zen practice. So to reject being, especially after we read all this, you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to reject everything we've just been reading about, everything Socrates has said, everything Parmenides has said, all the other spiritual traditions we've been reading about. You really have to, it's not, it'd be pretty much impossible to rationally reject all of that, which is okay, because if you do, even though you've been reading all this and you're open to it and all that sort of stuff, then that might be evidence of a block. Literally. If you are blocked from being open to the idea of understanding and being and knowing self, then how can you reach your higher goals of understanding, experiencing, and knowing self? As we said, you can't have the false belief and the goal at the same time. You can't simultaneously become a master mechanic and have the false belief that cars work because of magic or devils in oil or something like that. There's a lot. We have fun imagining false beliefs that are inconsistent with becoming a master mechanic, but we are not interested in that. We're doing that as a metaphor to understand being a master of self. As we were reading, insights about the self, understanding about the self, and higher states of mind that emerge along the way. Equally so for problems. Everything we just said about the understandability, the knowability, the insights, balloons, and the integration of that into a state of being that we apply to Platonic philosophy. You could reject all of those equally so for problems. You can't understand problems. Humans are just irrational, emotional, creatures. You can reject the experience of freeing problems. Hey, these people who help free what we're reading, free philosophers and Buddhists from their problems so that they are able to actually verify that freedom in their enlightenment experiences. They were just all lying. They were in a giant conspiracy. They're all just loonies. You could do that. You could reject the understanding of problems, the experience of being free of problems. You could reject the art. Hey, this systematic, empirically verified system of understanding human problems, now this would require a very significant kind of block. Because there is so much evidence and reason, and you can prove it yourself, then you have to sort of reject everything. And it's been empirically verified in the, validation studies in the back of the book. Here are some lovely pictures. You have to say, well, understanding itself doesn't exist. And no, reality doesn't. Nietzsche, nihilism, right? Nothing exists. Everything is illusion. So up is down, right is left. No, it's not even as bad as that. That's relativism. It's not even that up can be down if you want it to be. That's relativism, relative to your opinions. It's my opinions that, make up something obviously wrong. That planes fly in the air because there's ducks. They steal the essence of ducks that can fly and they put them into the planes when they build them. That's why planes fly. And my opinion is just as true as your opinion, even if you went to plane school. That's relativism. Nietzsche or nihilism is even worse. Not even that's true. Nothing is anything. So there are different levels of blocks you can have that can be understood, that function to reject participation in the logos. And what we're doing specifically on this channel is participating as best as we can with the highest excellence as we can in the logos. And all the benefits we get are because of that. Applying that to music, you understand the system of music. Applying that to philosophy, that's the paradigm for spirituality and personal development. Applying it to midwifery, what we're doing here is participating in the logos, allowing us to understand the nature of problems and thus free ourselves from them. Has to go hand in hand with doing philosophy, of course, because the higher your goals, the more your problems will be surfaced. So you can't do one without the other. So checking in with chat. I hope that was good. Hello, I've studied philosophy for the past 24 years. Oh, great. I have a uni philosophy degree. Primary was taught Western analytical tradition, philosophy of language. I hope you find something new and unusual and bringing you lots of wonder and questions in what we're doing here, because we there are some previous videos you can catch up on. I think we're only about 5 in, but we were specifically reading how the Western academic tradition kind of dropped the ball after Plato, after Socrates. Let's go back really quickly. So we're reading how it all began. We're reading Philosophical Midwifery, the new paradigm of understanding human problems, and how did it all come to be? Well, early in the author's life, Dr. Pierre Grimes, he was at... Right, so he was studying at St. John's, and he realized that the European academic tradition really dropped the ball after Socrates. And historically, there is reasons for that too, as we read here. The word philosophical midwifery comes from Plato's dialogue in the Theaetetus. Socrates is a midwife of true ideas or false beliefs. That's the game. Has a long history. It's a purely rational method of pursuing questions that benefit the subject. Okay? Different from academic traditions where you kind of get a degree to have a degree. Any benefit that you get from that is kind of how you can use it, I suppose, to get a job. Plato applied it to the ideas that blocked one from participating in philosophy. It reached a high point with Proclus. He applied it to resolving obstacles of understanding Platonic metaphysics. That means before the physical world or the realm of being. How do we understand the true realm of being? That we can only experience if we do philosophy and are able to turn our mind around, separate from our physical senses and experience it. If you're someone like the last Phil in the chat, you might never play that game, because he seems to get a lot of enjoyment out of rejecting Platonic metaphysics. No evidence or reason, of course. Socrates pointed this out. He said, hey, the people who don't pick up this game of going through the education and nurture of mastering the logos will claim to be the most wise. But how can they? They don't have the logos. They can't do a dialectic. They can't benefit people. They can't walk people through a dialogue to either discover and remove their problems or reach their highest experiences in metaphysics. So what will be their basis for claiming they are so clever and patting themselves on the back? He says they're anti-logos. They will say they're most clever because they say you can't understand anything. There is no realm of being. There is no actual personal development. There is no knowing. And I am the one who knows that. And so that the only thing they can do is be what we might call a hater, or a right-wing grifter, we might call them. Or they will try and silence the logos. Personal attacks, that kind of crap. Shouting over you, like we see on, various different news networks and debate channels on YouTube and that sort of thing. Anti-logos. Now, Plato's teacher Parmenides says this is the greatest defect of the soul. Because if you, even if you come across a channel where you can learn the dialectic, and even if you meet a dialectician who is skilled and practiced, even then you won't be convinced. So what Parmenides was talking about is the power of a false belief that you are stuck in. That even if you meet Parmenides or Socrates himself, masters of the dialectic, that can bring you through understanding to understand for yourself being, or the idea or experience of self, and experience it. Validate your understanding, indirect experience, and maybe even go beyond it to the self. Even if you meet Socrates or Parmenides, if you're someone like old mate in chat, no, you're going to be in trouble. Socrates in the Phaedo said what he thinks is the worst condition is hating the logos. So kind of tied together. Parmenides says not being open to a realm of metaphysics. Socrates says hating the logos. Either way, it has the same results. So, okay, Proclus was at the studying metaphysics at Plato's Academy. It ended with the destruction of our classical culture and the closing of Plato's Academy by Christian Emperor Justinian in 529 AD. What we call the start of the Dark Ages, where everything went to crap. So this progression through rational trust to understanding dianoia. Now I say dianoia because it's not understanding the way we think it is. It's understanding being or metaphysics. Correct, valid or rational trust, understanding, direct experience or nous. Integrating that into a state called wisdom. Going beyond that. I'm not going to say what that's called. That's a puzzle we're carrying. All of that was thrown away. That was called evil, and instead what was told as good is faith. The opposite. Reject all of that to believe things that you are told by people who'll kill you if you don't. Faith. To believe that which is not provable. You just have to have faith. Or already disproven by evidence and reason. The worst kind of thinking. That was lauded as virtue. And of course, if you the philosophers were murdered, the academy was shut down. If you were reading philosophical texts or even the Bible, you'd be murdered for many hundreds of years. So really, really sad part of history. Now, our job on this channel is to turn that around, rediscover what we left behind. And so we're reading a story of a particular fellow who realized this, and we're sort of following it in real time to see how did he come to develop philosophical midwifery. What is it? A systematic, rational approach of asking questions and judging answers that allow you to discover the cause of and nature of your problems, and if you do so sufficiently, you can free yourself from them. So a rational approach to solving problems that uses the very same dialectic and logos that we use in philosophy to climb the ladder towards being. And also we can use it in anything else we do. So on this channel, we are studying music. So we're trying to apply the logos to music. And in our reading, we are looking for the logos and dialectic in music. So it's turtles all the way down, as they say, dialectic all the way down. By benefit is the author's thought that Socrates only was concerned with his own benefit in interacting with the logos, because the good for the whole of society was a part of his motivating intention. It's a good question. That actually came up in our Phaedo read-along. In distinguishing the sort of haters or anti-logos, we might call them trolls, people who call themselves philosopher. Put the name philosopher in their username, maybe, even though they're the opposite. Lovers of their own opinions. Philodoxia, Socrates calls them. And they function through anti-logos. He says, you know what their goal is? Well, their goal isn't to climb that ladder through higher experiences and development of soul. No, because they don't think there is such a thing. They think they've already got it all figured out. We call them up themselves. In Australia anyway. Their goal is to persuade the people who are around them to believe what they're saying. Socrates says, I'm not interested in that. Look how greedy I am for the logos. I only want myself to believe what I'm saying. Now, if I hit upon the truth, it will be naturally beautiful and persuasive anyway. and will have a secondary benefit of persuading others who are open, genuinely good actors wanting to listen and learn. But that's not my goal. It's for myself. So that's the benefit we seek. Of course, using an art brings in the idea of benefiting the patient. A doctor's job is to benefit the patient only. So here we have Dr. Grimes, Pierre Grimes, benefiting the people at the Zen Center, using this art of dialectic to help them understand for themselves, not believing some Yahoo, understand for themselves the nature of their blocks that were preventing their development in their Zen practice. So, benefiting the patient. And then he went on to realize, oh, I was diminishing what I was doing and didn't realize that it's essential to Zen practice and all spiritual traditions. And then it was acknowledged by one Zen guru. And then the Noetic Society was formed. Other people were benefiting from Dr. Grimes's art. Then they realized they wanted to learn it. And then he started holding retreats. That's where we are. Now, I would like to think that once we start to see the benefit we get. Now, by the way, in modern psychotherapy, all of the advances have been people picking out bits and pieces from this, usually not crediting Pierre Grimes. So it will be the new system of psychology. Hopefully soon too, it will be the new system of philosophy, just learning how to read properly, not the way it's taught in academic traditions where you don't read, you get other official interpretations or projections. And we haven't even been able to read Socrates until the last 10 years because we haven't actually had a decent translation. All of the translations of Plato have been complete garbage, literally mistranslating the key words. So how can you discover the meaning? And the meaning is even deeper. There are certain keywords given in a pattern where some are left out and you have to discover, oh, there's something missing here. That's how well written it is. Every word is there for a reason. So all translators have been not only mistranslating, given the wrong translation of keywords, they've been playing loose and fast with the structure. So you can't discover the questions that are there to be discovered. That's what we are doing. Equally so for problems. If you talk to someone about the problems that they're facing, like Pierre is doing here, they will use certain words in a certain order that you have to pay careful attention to. They might also miss out certain words where they should have put them in. So it's a similar kind of puzzle applied to people's problems, as we are discovering in our reading of Socrates. Only midwifery, it's to discover the false beliefs, give birth to the false beliefs, whereas in philosophy it's to give birth to the true ideas, but it's the same kind of thing, using the same system, the dialectic. So that's where we're at. I hope that's a good refresher for those watching along on YouTube, watching the recording, and I hope that's a good introduction for our new friend in chat. Okay, so higher states of mind emerge from this new meditation. What's the new kind of meditation? Wondering about the 13th proposition in Proclus's Elements of Theology, that the one and identical are identical, the one and the good are identical. Later, the fundamental question of Plato's Republic emerged and was added to their question. What, after all, is the one itself? Now we know it's one. What is the one self? Because this book is about 25 years old. What was once only a speculative question became an object for meditation. And with this shift, we are returning the Platonic tradition to its spiritual roots. Plato saw in his own, let me just, no, keep it. Plato saw that in his own time, that the birth of this philosophy would rival, okay, this is important. Okay, this relates to your question, Adam. Is this something that not only benefits us as souls, but the whole world? Plato, in his time, that the birth of this philosophy, what is kind of stillborn, and hopefully we are breathing life back into it now in this channel, would rival the divinely inspired works of Homer and Hesiod. Change society, so to speak. Because these were the texts of the day, what we might call the Bible and the Quran, perhaps. The systems of divinely inspired works, maybe not, well, lacking a logos because they're divinely inspired, but systems of thinking that permeate the culture. What was true then is still true today. Oh, there you go. Let's highlight that. What was true then is still true today. Since this system can rival the spirit, this system, let's do a different color, that we are learning, the system of the logos or philosophical midwifery, either applied to problems or metaphysics. This system, or music. We have a music thing in the channel. This system can rival, this one, can rival the spiritual traditions we find about us. Rival the spiritual traditions we find. So, we have a long list. What have we got already? We've got our old friend L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology. We've got the Western academic traditions and like St. John's College. We've got the Latin tradition ever since 529 AD, where the current systems from the Roman or Latin tradition took over and killed the Greek and silenced this tradition. We have these different spiritual traditions we've mentioned, the Hindu tradition, the Chinese tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Zen tradition. We have the modern psychotherapy tradition with Jung, and also Alistair, what's his name? Albert Ellis. I'm not sure if we've read it in the text yet, but Pierre did meet Albert Ellis, who is the founder of cognitive behavioral emotive therapy. Cognitive emotive behavioral therapy, the kind of what you study at college now. So all of these pretty much is a good encapsulation of all of the different fundamental ways of thinking that are the spiritual traditions, we might say, of the present. And here is a new one, or an old one, a rediscovered old one. And so what we are just learning here is true today as it was back then. The birth of this, or the reawakening, because that's the name of the channel, of this kind of philosophy would rival all of those things we just mentioned. All of those key figures this guy happened to run into in his life because he's lived an amazing kind of life. Now, so what? Well, so also we could add in our I don't know if he's a friend, but he's took his time out to share his opinions in chat, at least, so that's something. Who is in a spiritual tradition that rejects the logos. That probably would go under the modern academic. He seems to be interested in Wagner and Nietzsche, which is in that Latin European lineage that killed Socrates and shut down the well, they didn't kill Socrates. They shut down the academy and burnt the libraries and prevented this from being studied until now. So he is a very good student to a very terrible tradition, and finds it interesting for him to prevent his own participation in what would benefit him. So we could throw in Wagner, and I think it's Wagner. Let me see. Yeah. And Nietzsche. We can throw in Nietzsche and Kant and Hegel and all those guys who we claim to be experts and wise, even though they themselves reject wisdom because they think it's unknowable because they're in that tradition. So we kind of believe them to be clever because we're told in our schools, and if we repeat that back to our teachers, we get an A and we get a diploma, and we can feel clever about ourselves and maybe get some money from a job. But all of those would be within the spiritual traditions that are either indifferent to or specifically hostile to the very logos that we are seeing is necessary and essential for any kind of spiritual development and removing the problems that will always come along with any kind of spiritual development. Indifferent to maybe the Eastern spiritual traditions that say, have questions, don't have questions. Here's a fake question. Here's a koan. Go and sit on a mat. I don't care about questions. Hostile to would be the ones that we mentioned from the Western academic tradition, the Latin tradition. Materialism rejects being. And the ones that are tentative might be someone like Jung, who did think that there was an importance in the dialectic in psychotherapy, but didn't make it explicit, didn't record any of his sessions, didn't actually come out and say, well, actually what I'm doing is philosophy, and was, what's the word? Cowardly or hiding, maybe? Let's say hiding, let's be nice. So hiding from the logos, indifferent to the logos, or specifically violently in opposition to the logos. And we can have other spiritual religious traditions that are violently opposed to the logos as well. Hey, don't ask questions. That's the enemy of faith. Emperor Justinian established this tradition and the start of the Dark Ages when he killed all those clever bastards with their questions. Right? And every fascist that comes into power, who does he go after first? The thinkers. The intellectuals, the ones who wear glasses. That's no coincidence. Violently opposed to reason, reflection, communication, dialogue. What did our friend in chat do today? Just became a troll, anti-logos, pat himself on the back, kissed himself in the mirror and then just left. No dialogue, no reason, reflection. Considered a kind of success, most likely. Preventing the things that we are learning here. How do we begin a dialogue? How do we begin open? Hey, that's part of the reason why we have to be doing Zen Buddhism or Platonic philosophy. Because if you are motivated enough to sit on a mat for how many hours a day, or if you're motivated enough to read Plato with the integrity that we do in this channel, then you've got reasons to overcome your blocks. If you prefer whatever you get from acting like a Noah, there'll be no reason for you to go through this process of removing your blocks that prevent you from reaching success. It takes courage. It takes the virtues, courage. It takes a cool mind, temperance. It takes seeking wisdom. It takes functioning in a just way. So those are the preconditions. From what I recall of my history courses, this was a long time ago now, so Socrates never wrote anything down. That's right. And Plato's dialogues come to us via several texts and other fragments from Egypt. So Socrates didn't write anything down, but Plato did. He wrote down a lot. And thankfully, a lot of Plato's dialogues survived the various different burnings from that Western European Latin tradition and Catholic Christian tradition. So we do have the text outlining what Socrates was saying. And there might be reason to suggest that Plato did not reach the level of development that Socrates did, but thankfully enough, He was a smart enough dude and from a kind of tradition that valued remembering words precisely and accurately, that he was able to record Socrates' words. So Socrates was functioning at a very high level of the Logos. Plato's probably the next wisest person since Socrates, but there are reasons why there might be a level beyond Plato that Socrates was at. But that's a question we take with us. The problem with the translations since then into the English is, like we're seeing here, if in order to translate Socrates, you need a level of understanding of what he's doing. If you don't realize that there's a logos going on, and he's specifically giving you keywords, and he's changing keywords to show you something, he's implanting questions and puzzles. If you don't know that, as all of the translators up until now didn't, you'll play fast and loose with the translations as they did. Second problem. Every translator has their own pathologos. They didn't have midwifery. So they will be projecting their own ignorance and false opinions into the text, preventing their mind from meeting the mind of the actual ancient Greek, Socrates. Another problem, the societal conditions. A lot of the translators were within religious traditions and political traditions that didn't like certain words translated. One of the key words in the text is the self. And if the self is beyond God, and you grow up in a tradition where, God is the best, then they might not want you translating that key word accurately. So there are lots of problems with the past translations, and we could call them the great betrayals. The great betrayals of it's us, yours and mine, our intellectual and spiritual heritage and tradition, our golden age, has been betrayed by these past translators. Now, the difference is, in the last decade, we have the Balboa translations, which give us the actual words. Many of those words, there is not an English equivalent, so we've had to keep the Greek and learn what the heck it means. Another problem with reading Socrates up until now, the word phronesis is never translated. We don't have a word for phronesis. It's key. Dianoia has been translated as understanding, sometimes knowledge. It's not either. It's the dialectic applied to being. So that's the thing. So that's why we have this. That's why we have this channel, to pick up where we left off at Socrates and be able to read Socrates, who was sharing the logos, which is our method for reaching our highest goals, our purpose or destiny, and also, when applied to philosophical midwifery, free us from our problems or our fate. Now, that's one of the differences between Socrates and Plato. Socrates functioned as a philosophical midwife on problems too. Plato didn't. One of the reasons being, they killed Socrates when Plato was young, didn't have time to go through this process. But there are lots of stories about Socrates that Plato didn't write about that show him doing what we are learning here. So pretty much we're going back to where we left off at Socrates. If we do, we have a new system that will rival all of the spiritual systems we find about us. And secondarily, what we need to prevent human society itself from playing out the implications of its pathologos, and not only continuing its continuous war, bloodshed, exploitation, genocides, capitalism, fascism that we're doing to create extreme unnecessary suffering to humans and the planet, but also our extinction. If this system of the dialectic and logos that has been buried since 529 AD is absolutely necessary to solve problems, essential we just read, then humanity has to reawaken it and apply it to our problems, otherwise we're screwed. Many species have gone extinct, we can be one of them. So, reference back to your earlier question. Primarily, it's for us. Whether or not the rest of the world picks up on it, who knows? If they do, we save human society. We save our species. If we don't, well, we don't. But we can as souls. We can do what we are here to do as a soul and learn this as best as we can. And this is the kind of learning we can take with us, says Socrates in the Phaedo. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question. Therefore, so that's all good. So some context. So these kind of questions are important because we're not just reading it for the sake of reading it. We want to apply it to our own thinking, our own lives, our own world. Make it alive for us. Now, reading the text in this specific kind of way that requires the keywords and the right translations, that's personified with the myth of Apollo, mythology, characterized with Apollo. Applying it to our lives to see holes, to push the implication, to make it personally meaningful, that's Aphrodite. That's what inspires us. We talked about needing motivation. You need high goals, spiritual goals, philosophical goals, spiritual goals, maybe even saving humanity goals. These are the things that will motivate you. Otherwise, you'll be like old mate Troll, who has left the chat, and you won't have the motivation to do Apollo, to read, to learn, to change your mind, to free yourself from ignorance in midwifery. So it's worth these sorts of questions and reflecting in this way. It's good for us. Therefore, okay, you brought up the semantics of the Greek text and how the scholars have translated those texts. Yes. So the word isn't semantics, the word is interpretation. Interpretation is to add what isn't there in the text or leave out what is there. Sometimes called projection. So to read in that way when we don't ourselves add what isn't there or leave out what is there is a kind of yoga in itself, because we have to bring our mind to match the mind of Socrates. As we are doing here, we're reading with such integrity. Every word is meaningful to us. Lots of highlighting, as you see. This is reading with integrity. So it's not semantics, it's reading without interpretation. Our friend Pierre Grimes said, really all I'm doing is teaching people how to read. Now he's done a lot more than that. That's why we're reading his book. So we want to know what that means. So, I give grace to modern scholars. Don't give grace to modern scholars. Don't lie. Don't lie. Don't be polite. Hey, if they screw up, they screwed up. If you tell the truth about their screw ups, they will benefit if they are of good character. So, hey, by the way, you mistranslated this. What kind of a jerk would say, shut up, just pretend I was right. I want the delicious money that comes from being wrong. No, don't give grace. Don't give grace. Demand every word be translated properly. Otherwise, what? You're going to just... you're not reading him, you're reading the translator. Context of the culture is important too, right? But you also have to hit every word right, which is why when we read the Balboa translation, he is someone who has studied the context and the philosophy and the history for many, many years, better than probably anyone else. Well, not anyone else, but up there. Juan Balboa has studied with the author of this book, so he knows the words. And also he has the Greek underneath. So if the text ever hinges on something, you can look it up yourself. Meaning you don't have to give grace to anyone. You can read it for yourself. No need for belief. Which is good, which is why we read it in this way. Because you might see things that no one else has seen before. Every day that happens. That's how profound Socrates writes. Don't let anyone retranslate it or mistranslate it or give it a modern context. I mean, some people would make the case, oh, it's good for people new. I don't think so. I think just read it the way it is. Well, yeah, okay. Well, there is a caveat there. Sometimes the past translations we will read as well because it might flow better in the English. But every time we do, when we go back into the Balboa translation, it's laughable how wrong they are with the key words. Like Socrates will be talking about, oh, it's important for us to move from dianoia to nous, and then nous to wisdom. And then we'll go into the past translations to see how it reads more fluidly in English. And all three of those words will be the same word. It's important for us to go from knowing to knowing to knowing. What the heck? They're three different words. Anyway, don't believe me. Follow along with the series, check it out for yourself, and we see for ourselves the differences. Don't believe me. This is not a belief game. See it for yourself, but keep an open mind. In fact, that's part of the dialectic. Keep both sides open. See what pans out. I'm not saying there aren't bad translations. Oh, good, because there are bad translations. I'd rather there a direction being made out of better translations. Well, yeah, just read the Balboa if you want the truth. If you want to be in a tradition of ignorance, take your pick from the other ones. The kind of worry about translator must know the kind of... Yes, good point. The more you understand the nature of philosophy, the better you can do it, which is so important for the Balboa translation. And also one of the reasons why we're reading this. If Plato wrote all these texts about Socrates using the dialogue, the dialectic and logos to bring people to higher states of insight, states of mind and understanding of being, but didn't write dialogues about Socrates applying the same dialectic to people's problems, which isn't in being, then maybe, as you're saying, Plato didn't have a deep understanding or mastery of philosophical midwifery, and so couldn't have written those books. Could only do the upside, could only do one half of it. The reaching destiny part, not the escaping fate part. But in his dialogues, there are mentions of Socrates having conversations, not with scholars of metaphysics, but with housewives and blacksmiths and bringing them to tears. Kinds of things that happen in this game, freeing people from their unsuspected false beliefs that cause their problems. Which might be why we didn't have that tradition after Socrates, and why our friend Dr. Grimes here had to rediscover it, formalize it, go through it on himself. It's no good him discovering this and just diminishing it, realizing how important it is and sharing with the rest of us. And for us to meet him in that level of integrity to learn it ourselves, so we can understand it and prove it. Hey, at the end of reading this text, if it doesn't work, we can send a nasty email to the publisher and say, this empirically verified system of psychotherapy that is actually in the ancient Hellenic tradition and done by Socrates doesn't work. It's garbage. I want my money back. And maybe they will give you your money back. But we can't know that until we try it ourselves. Added or taken away can be meant by to add or take away. So that's interpretation. We want to read without interpretation. Like when the way that we're taught to read in school is, what did this text mean to you? Well, when I read To Kill a Mockingbird, it meant that Jesus loves me. Oh, very good. Very good. You get an A. Well, that's not in the text. You're projecting your own personal opinions and beliefs. Now that's why we do it together. You might not realize that you're doing it. That's why we have the text on the board. That's why this isn't a regular philosophy podcast with people throwing their opinions at each other. That's garbage. I mean, sometimes it feels nice when someone can think rationally and they're talking to a public figure who has a lot of public sway, and he's specifically manipulating people through bad arguments. That can be fun. I like those sometimes, where somebody is speaking reason to con artists. But here we are reading the text word for word. And then we'll notice, when do we miss a word? When do we miss a line? When do we want to run away? When do we want to throw our hands up and say, no more for me? Those are moments where our pathologos or our problems are specifically showing their face to prevent our further development of the logos. And you might not realize you're doing it. That's why it's not a one-person game.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
That's why I'm sharing it online. That's why we have a Discord. That's why I do my best to, even if people come in as trolls, they don't always stay as trolls. They don't even know they're doing it half the time. Because why would they be doing that which actively harms them, which prevents their benefit? So that's what we mean by reading without interpretation, without adding what isn't there or leaving out anything that is. If we do, it might be gold. It might be things we can use in our own personal philosophical midwifery to find out why. Why whenever I'm reading, I add all this stuff about Jesus? And then my friends say, hey man, Socrates isn't talking about Jesus, you know. I feel in my heart he is. Well, dude, that's not the logos. To differentiate the pathologos, the sick thinking, reasoning, from the self-logos. Now, we won't belittle each other for having a problem. That would be insane because we're all human beings. We all have a pathologos and we all forget the logos. We forget the logos. That's why we read Socrates, to remember it through the dialectic and logos. You're practicing it, using it, sharing it with your friends over coffee. And when I say coffee, we have a fun game. We have a lot of fun here. When I say coffee, have a sip of coffee. It's just a game we play. Just a bit of fun. Share it with your friends over coffee. That's the process of remembering what our soul once knew in being. Now, the other part of the game is discovering what we falsely believe is true. That's what we're doing here. Same dialectic, well, same structure, just used in a slightly different way. Every human being has that. False belief and a forgetting. So Socrates says purifying is part of the game and perfecting. Another analogy is if you've got a broken arm, you go to the doctor to go from sickness to health. That's midwifery. But once you're healthy doesn't mean you're in the perfect physical condition. You have to go to a personal trainer or do a sport or something. That's going from health to excellence. That's the two parts of the game. Therefore, it was quite natural that I would study and practice jnana yoga. What's jnana yoga? Jnana yoga is a fancy word, so use it to impress your friends. For yoga means method of joining, from the word yoke, which means to join. So all yogas have as their goal, at their core, to join with being. They might say it in a different way, to join with the divine or have enlightenment, but it's to join with the realm of being. That's what yoga means. So it's the method. Jnana, that's not the right color. Jnana means intellectual or understanding. So it's an understanding spiritual method. That's what we've been talking about. So good for us.
Wow.
Jnana yoga, also Taoism, also Advaita Vedanta. Oh my goodness, these words. Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta. Now that's going to make you sound clever with your friends. Kashmir Shivism. Oh, that's a deep cut. But we need deep cuts because this particular one has a significant place within. Okay, so let me draw this. So we've been talking about there being a kind of ladder of the logos. Let's do white. Kind of ladder of the logos. So that's the logos that has what One rail being our understanding. Yeah. The other rail of the ladder being states of mind. And there are levels that you go through. So our old mate from chat today was nihilist, likes his friend Nietzsche. So that's right down the bottom. Nothing exists. Of course, there's relativism. That's just your opinion. I like the opinions of these guys. Then there's materialism. Well, okay, well, maybe it's not just opinion. There's actually hard truths, but they're only physical truths. And then there's a level of development where you realize actually there is a realm of being. And then different levels of development beyond that. So here we might say this is the realm of being. Up here is being. And below that part is, below that line is just the physical world of becoming. So materialism, stoicism, Aristotelianism, they're all in this realm of becoming, the physical world. Now nihilism is the rejection of both. That's why it's right down the bottom. So this is our journey to reach our goal of destiny. That's what we do through the logos and dialectic. That's why we read Socrates. Now it has a shadow. So make a shadow here. That color. Let's go this color. Shadow. This is our patho. So whatever we see in the true, we see reflected in the false. Our patho logos. So what's the opposite of destiny? Fate. Notice one goes up, one stays where you are. If you're certain about your problems, then you're not going to go anywhere new. You're going to live and die the same way your dad did or your mum did or whoever you got your false beliefs from. So why am I talking about this now? Well, the reason why I liked hearing Kashmir Sufism is because each of those levels of development up that ladder has a corresponding system of understanding and state of mind. Now, there is a particular tradition. Oh, and by the way, you can have traditions that personify it. We talked about nihilism. Nihilism personifies this bottom rung of the ladder. Materialism, stoicism, relativism. Now, above this line here, there are different spiritual traditions. So we might call these purely academic because they reject the spirit. They reject the realm of being. There's no such thing as a soul. It's just chemicals squirting in the brain, or something like, yeah, so the add or taken away could be meant by the Greek author. No, absolutely not. You can't do that. You can't say, well, I think he meant. That's projecting. If Socrates is using every word properly, you have to believe him. Well, not believe him, you have to trust him. If you want to make the case that he got it wrong and he should have added more context and he should have written differently, you can make that case, only after you've read it accurately first. So context is a buzzword used by people who want to reject understanding. Yesterday I was reading I was watching an interview with a Republican, and hey, by the way, when Donald Trump said this objectively terrible thing, how can you defend that? Oh no, you took him out of context. Context is used as a buzzword to say, ignore what is true and let's pretend it's something else. check it out. Like there's another, those YouTube videos where it's someone who can use reason talking with a religious figure. They'll say, hey, how come the Bible says slavery is good? Oh no, you took it out of context. What he really meant was slavery isn't really good, but I'm just telling you that so you can believe me. I don't know, they just make up some nonsense. So context doesn't mean changing the text or the words. It's usually a buzzword used by people who want to project or want to silence the truth. When Socrates said there's a realm of being, no, you don't get the context. What he means is blah, 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 blah. Now, understanding the word itself, that's different. Like the word eidos means to behold. So you could say, well, there's a context of what beholding means, but really you're just defining the word. In some sense, Plato was more of a historian. Really? If we take the work at face value, in one dialogue, Socrates has a discussion with an older Parmenides. That's a good one. We have a series on that. If you have any ideas of Parmenides, put them in a sack of hypotheses, possible ways of understanding Parmenides. Take them with you. And now jump into the series we have on Parmenides. We've done the opening and the first hypothesis. Read the text along with us and see how they pan out. Hopefully you'll be confused. Otherwise, why do it? Just to prove you're already clever? No. Hopefully you'll find something new and you'll change your mind. So, anything I say addressing the rest of your sentence, take with a grain of salt. Don't let me take away your hypotheses or questions. Carry them with you, but make sure you verify them by reading the text word for word. That's the game. That's the whole game. We're reading. Not adding context, not adding interpretation. I mean, context is such a dangerous word. It's thrown around loose. Reading it word for word. Okay, so just a heads up before I read the rest of the sentence. He pretty much wiped the floor with Socrates. I mean, in what way? Sure, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what you mean by wipe the floor, but maybe that's a cool way of seeing it. I'd like to see that if you can say more about it. Plato didn't himself bring man's common issues into the same ontological perspective pursued by Socrates. Didn't bring man's common issues. Well, Socrates had his issues. That's what we carry with us, our own problems. When Socrates offered his ontology, what? He offered his ontology? I don't see that there. It might not have been what Plato intended. Rather, Plato only wanted to present Socrates' ideas. Right, so, okay. So Socrates does come with some questions. It's pretty cool how the Parmenides starts. Hey, I have some questions for Zeno. He doesn't come in looking for Parmenides at first. He wants Zeno. He says, I've read your dialogues, your hypotheses. I've got a problem. First line of the first one. Let's start there. And he starts criticizing. And then it unfolds. It's pretty cool. So I don't see any reason to change what was written. I think the whole dialogue, you have to look at how the whole dialogue starts. It's a remembering of a remembering. Someone says, hey, was anybody present at this dialogue? And do they have the certain level of mind where they could remember it word for word? Oh yes, there was somebody else who was there. And he had a friend and he would always repeat it to him. Let's go meet that friend. So it's a telling of a story. It's a recount of a recount of a recount, more or less. But it's our job to see if every word fits. If so, what does that mean about the logos? But that's an interesting point. People who come into this channel who have had an education get taught opinions about these people. So they're often the hardest people to reawaken the quest for philosophy. Why? Because the teachers present their own bullshit opinions. This is my personal interpretation of Socrates. Every college professor will be different because every human being has pathologos and has a level of development up this ladder. My university teacher would be very different than yours. Same thing with religions. Most people never read the text, they just have their pastor or local preacher's interpretations. And usually in academic traditions, they don't ever read the text, they read some other dude's interpretation. So people come in with these opinions. Oh, Parmenides was actually a logical exercise, you know. What? I've never heard such nonsense. Why are you so certain? If you read the book, then you know that can't be true. Here's another good one. The Republic is a very poor political text. Have you read the book? I know at universities they teach Republic as a political text. That's just some dude's opinion. But if you read the book, you don't have to believe his opinion. In the book, Socrates says this is not a political text at all. So you get taught these opinions and you pay a lot of money for these diplomas that teach you the exact opposite of what you would discover if you read the book yourself. So don't take that personally. That's just an observation of people who've come through this channel and come through philosophy over the 20 years that I've been in the game. So be wary of the opinions you get from others. Read the book yourself. Ourselves, word for word. That's what we do on this channel. The study of being, that's what it means. Yeah, that's what ontology, ontos. Ontos, the realm of being, is what we call this, above this line here. That's ontology or ontos. The study of being. If Socrates thinks there is a realm of Platonic forms, yeah, again, the word form, this is one of the big ones. There is no such thing as Platonic forms. That's not in the text. That's some interpretation by some European scholar over the last 2,000 years. One of the greatest betrayals against philosophy is using the word form. The word form isn't there. The word is eidos, A-I-D-O-S, or idea. It's not the English word for idea, concept, and it's not form. So literally, they teach you the exact opposite of what's in the text. That's why it's so important to have the real ancient Greek when we read, which we do in the Balboa translation. So a little taster for those who aren't in our other reading group. If you are familiar with Platonic philosophy from school, you might discover everything is the opposite if you get into that and get into our reading. And also, you will never have to believe someone else. You can read it for yourself. And hey, if you read it for yourself, if you understand it for yourself, is there a need to believe someone else? Yeah, okay, well, you don't have to worry about context. I mean, the historical context is interesting, but in the text, there usually isn't much of a need for that. Like, usually the text stands on its own. There's no need. But be wary of people who say, oh, no. When Socrates says that there is a realm of being, he doesn't mean that. Let me give you the context. Normally, Socrates doesn't work that way. But hey, if someone makes a good case, then sure. But usually we don't need to. But the word forms isn't there. It's eidos or idea, which means to behold. It's one of the ways of beholding the realm of being in self. Scholars need to get their reference right to what the terms mean. Yeah, I'm just repeating myself now. Usually you don't need the context. The word will have its own meaning relative to its own self. Like, I don't see why you would have to change the meaning of a word based on context. Having an understanding of the historical context of the time is still important. That's part of reading, sure. But when we read the words itself, when Socrates is talking about the nature of the soul, for instance, or the nature of being, ontology, as you say, then we can just listen to what he says. Take the keywords, organize it ourselves. Now you might say, well, what I mean by context is sometimes he leaves out bits and pieces because the context is he thinks it's good for us to learn. So in the context of the text, Socrates in the Phaedo says, hey, the first level of learning is to trust the logos, remember what I say about what philosophy is, and repeat it all the time, every day. But that's very important. But that's only philomathesis, love of learning. That trust is important to begin. But if you stay at the level of trust, says Socrates, some guy's going to come along and he's going to use an argument that sounds true, is familiar with your religious upbringing or your mythology, and they're going to trick you or persuade you to something else. And so you might start trusting the logos that I'm sharing about philosophy, but this guy's changed your mind, and now you don't know what to believe. You might end up hating the logos itself. That's the worst condition of the soul. Therefore, you have to read the text again in the activity of philos. So philos means love, mathesis means learning, philos, Sophia, is philosophy. That's your second level of reading. That's where you take those terms that you are familiar with in your first level, like the mechanic. You trust your mechanic, you listen to him and you remember what he says, but then you've got to organize it yourself within a system of understanding. That's the dialectic. And of course, there are two more levels of reading beyond philosophy. There's phronesis, your third reading of the text. And then there's a mysterious fourth one, which he doesn't mention. So if you know the context of the text within the text itself, it should be self-contained. So you can say, well, in the latter part of the text, he only gives a few pieces of the dialectic because the context says you need to not just remember what he says, you need to work out the structure of it yourself, the dialectic, because otherwise, you're going to get stuck, you're going to get manipulated, you're going to end up hating the logos if you don't learn the art yourself, and you can't judge arguments for yourself and judge people for yourself. So within that context, he might only give you 1, 2, 4, and 5 and miss out step 3 because he wants you to figure it out for yourself. That's part of being a good teacher. Now that is a good argument of context within what is provable within the text. But you shouldn't have to bring in outside texts or outside interpretations or opinions. It should be self-contained. That's a mark of a good text. So within the context of the text itself, sure. If anyone says, oh, no, let me add to the text. What are you adding? You can't add, that's interpretation. Oh no, it's okay, I'm using the word context. Usually that should be a red flag. Alarm bells should go off. Almost never it's needed when you're reading the text, almost never. And if there is context, it's within the text itself. Which is a different way of reading, by the way. It's not, what does it mean to you? Or now that's interesting because in the European tradition, they say, well, we want to create a context where we are smarter than Socrates because of evolution. Anyone older is dumber. They didn't have computers. So we have computers, so we are wiser than Socrates. That's the context that I'm wanting to add to the text so I can justify dismissing Plato or dismissing Socrates or dismissing our golden age. That's interpretation. That's usually how I see the word context used. But you don't have to do it because you can just read the text. And by the way, and all of the people who've come into this channel or come into the study of philosophy through the academic tradition, I've never heard anyone say that there are at least 4 levels of reading a text. What are they doing then? Socrates is saying it. What are you doing? Now, after I ask these questions, it often turns out, well, we didn't actually read the text. We read this other guy. That was the curriculum. Some other dude, and he gave us his summary of the text. Sometimes we'd read the cliff notes, but mainly it was this guy talking about the text. Sometimes it was the guy whose book we were reading was the lecturer, so we had to buy his book. Oh, thanks for the follow. Hi there, Maximus. Welcome. Thanks for the follow. So, what we are doing is very different. Every word counts. Every word counts. And the missing parts count. Okay, count in 2 ways. Count because that's the movement of development through the levels of reading of philosophy that we have to do to master the art. But also within our problem, if that's how we read, then anything that comes up to prevent us from doing that, prevents us from reading without interpretation, is evidence of a block. And you can't do one without the other. Because reading is, according to Socrates, literally our destiny, our purpose for being here. The meaning of life is to go through these 3 levels using the logos he provides within the text that we can now read because we have the actual translation with the actual ancient Greek that we can look up for ourselves because we have the internet. If that's the meaning of life, literally what we're here to do, the kind of learning and education and practice we can take with us through in our soul into our incarnations and maybe even escape reincarnation, then it's definitely going to raise all of our problems. You can't do one without the other. You will surface problems. There will be a voice that says, do something else. Go play sports ball. Argue with him instead of being open-minded. That will come up. Therefore, you have to do this. And that's essential. Why? Because the dialectic has 2 parts. The dialectic has 4 categories in 2 parts. What if the subject exists in being, ontology exists? And what if the subject doesn't? What follows? So for instance, we could say, what if being exists? What follows? There should be 4 categories of the dialectic that we've been talking about already. What if it doesn't? Well, then there's only the physical world. That anyone who talks about metaphysics is lying or is ignorant, or it's just an illusion. That would be in both. You have to do both to completely understand a subject within the dialectic. So what? Well, if we are a walking dialectic, because we don't know the self that truly exists, we've forgotten, we have to learn it. That's why we read Socrates. But hey, if that was enough, what about this? If we could just read Socrates, gain understanding, experience the realm of being, nous, what we formally translate as knowledge, but it's nous, go beyond even being to the self, integrate that with our understanding into a state of wisdom, use it as an art to help other people. If that's what all we had to do, then we'd have no reason to perfect the dialectic of our lives through the other side, part B. So necessarily, we have to be in the game of philosophical midwifery to learn the part of the dialectic applied to what isn't true. If this is our destiny, is to know thyself, to use the Greek expression, know know thyself, thyself means the highest of self, then our fate is a false belief or image of the self. And that's what we've been talking about when we say there are many spiritual traditions or religious traditions where they actually do have enlightenment experiences, but they still have their problems. Famously, the Catholic Church, known for many problems, even though they may have experienced various stages of enlightenment or being or God. Famously, we have archetypes within Eastern spirituality. The drunken sage or the pervy sage. Usually they're archetypes within anime. Naruto has a pervy sage master. Who else has a pervy? Goku has a pervy sage. People who still have their problems. Which was why when we were reading earlier, Pierre was saying, hey, this system should rival all spiritual traditions we find around us and is essential over here. Let me get rid of this. Where is it? Essential to Zen and the other spiritual traditions as well. They don't have this. So now we're trusting our author, but also we're understanding why. Necessarily, if you don't have a Logos tradition, how do you know whether you're at this level or this level? That's that famous saying. A Zen master and a Taoist cross each other on a path and they don't recognize each other. Why? Because one tradition jumps into this level, another one jumps into this level. They don't have understanding. It's not a jnana yoga understanding method, so they don't recognize someone on a different level. Now, the reason why we're talking about it now is Pierre is saying I had to also learn Kashmir Sufism. Now, that's a deep cut. It's not as well known as Taoism or Buddhism, but it's the kind of spiritual tradition that represents a certain level. It's like one of the only spiritual traditions that have as their highest enlightenment state or state of mind this certain level here. That's why I laughed when I saw Kashmir Sufism. It's a rare one that has their highest level of experience or enlightenment is here. Now Taoist is above, and there's a state above that, and so on and so on and so on. So, but what's cool is in this tradition we get to understand each of them. We don't have to pick favorites. Kashmir Sufism rules and Taoists suck. Ooh, boo. You wear red robes, we wear yellow robes. Yellow robes are the best. Yellow robes are the best. The kind of crap that we learn if you're only in the level of opinions and you just fight for your opinions, that's where war begins and genocides and so forth. You happen to belong to the wrong family or group of opinion holders. And of course, without the logos, there's no way of going from opinion to truth and understanding. Without understanding as our tradition, everyone can play understanding. It's not a matter of what opinion you happen to grow up in. You're born into a Catholic family, you're probably going to be Catholic. You're born in a different period of history, in a different part of the world, you're probably going to be Muslim. So what? So you're just fated to play out whatever level of development you happen to be born into? That's fate, based on your circumstances. Understanding allows us to escape our fate and reach our destiny. And the thing about understanding is everyone can play. Doesn't matter how long your hair is or what color your skin is or what family you were born into. It doesn't matter because it's universal. Doesn't even matter what planet you were born on or what period in history you were born. It's always open to anyone genuinely interested in understanding. That's the game. So it can, by definition, unify all of humanity together. Put an end to war and conflict and violence. Because understanding isn't helped by shooting or genocides. Understanding is helped by the principles that allow dialectic to happen. Free from problems, free from physical concerns. So whatever's the conditions needed within society so that we no longer have to worry about fighting for resources, wealth inequality, or exploitations, or any of that crap, we could live our sane, rational life where everyone can pursue the development of understanding that's confirmed in knowing, which is in being. So let's write nous. So you not only understand the realm of being, you get there and check it out for yourself and prove your understanding, and then beyond it to know thyself, while also applying that same dialectic art of understanding to our problems. That's what we're reading. That's the text we're reading. That's the implications of it in society. That's how different it will be for us to do. That's why this should challenge your false opinions. You should feel like this is not true. You might even want to fight me and, oh, how dare you say it's okay for you to say other traditions and families have false beliefs, but not mine, not my one. My one is special. That's evidence of a problem because you're rejecting a principle to defend a false belief. That's the nature of human problems: barbarism, doggishness, loyalty to what is false because it's what you grew up with, what you're familiar with. Now, it's not personal. We all have that. If you're in this game, if you're watching this series, you are the sort of person who is interested in sacrificing what's false, and whatever comfort and familiarity and maybe praise from family members or maybe rewards within society is offered to stay within this ignorance. You sacrifice that to know the truth. And the rewards up here far outweigh those and also are eternal. So it's a kind of learning and development you can take with you into your next lives. That's the game. It's always been the game. We are just doing it mindfully. We're reading, we're doing it. That's what we're playing. So a bit of a overview there. And by the way, Kashmir Sufism is this one here. When we get back into the Parmenides, we can recognize, hey, the very same 1, 2, 3, 4 categories of if the subject exists, and 1, 2, 3, 4 categories if the subject doesn't. That's in the dialectic. If this is the model or paradigm for understanding, it should apply everywhere. That's why we can use the same dialectic we learned from Socrates to our problems. If logos is understanding and it's universal, it should apply always for everything. So that's why we are looking for the logos when we study music in our music read-along, in our destiny when we read Plato, in our problems, but also in the Parmenides. He applies the exact same dialectic to understand all of the possible levels of understanding and states of mind that you can have. Every spiritual tradition or intellectual tradition will fit on this ladder that can be understood objectively, nothing to do with opinion or context, anything like that, can be objectively understood. And one of them happens to be represented by the tradition of Kashmir Sufism. When we get back into the Parmenides, he has 8 hypotheses, 4 if it does exist, 4 if it doesn't, and also one special one sitting on top beyond even that. Now, one of them happens to be represented by one of these levels of understanding and states of mind, or enlightenment states, is represented by the tradition of Kashmir Sufism. That's why we're talking about it now. There's a bit of an overview of where we're headed back when we get back into Parmenides. And by the way, if you want to understand all spiritual and understanding traditions, that's a friggin' meaningful goal, which means you will have your problems triggered if that's one of the goals you have. If you happen to be the sort of person who thinks, yeah, I'd really like to understand all possible systems of understanding and rank them and judge which is better and recognize where I am so I can get better and better and better, because I'm interested in learning and growth. I want enlightenment. I want to know what happens when I die, not just have to believe someone or just have faith. I want to experience it, which is the practice of nous. I even want to go beyond it. if you are that sort of person with that sort of way of thinking, then you think this is a meaningful goal, which means you will have your problems triggered, which means you do need to be in the game of philosophical midwifery too. That's one of the reasons why we've taken a pause from the Parmenides to learn this. Because when we go back, we're going to have to be doing both. And that's not my rules, that's the rules of reality. And so any other academic tradition that tries to teach philosophy or spirituality that doesn't also teach this is missing the mark, or is going to be ineffective, or will only reach a certain level before you hit your ceiling. That's why Pierre is saying it's essential in all these spiritual traditions, and it will necessarily challenge any spiritual tradition we see around us, because in principle you need this. I recently did a music course, and I recognized that every single person in that music course was able to develop an understanding of the logos of music up until a level, and then they went straight into their problems and they never got out. Every single one. Therefore, obviously, you need to be doing this along with this, even if it's just the logos of music, because everyone there found understanding music to be a meaningful goal. So if you understand knowing the meaning of life, or yourself, or recognizing what you're here for, fulfilling your destiny, any of these things, even understanding music, if you consider that a meaningful goal, you will have your problems triggered, because we're here to master the dialectic, and the dialectic has two problems, two sides. What it is, that's what we learn, and what it isn't. So in the text, we also had Pierre saying, he discovered that there are two kinds of learning. Here we go. One that can be taught, and one that can only be learnt by removing the blocks of your seeing. Those are the two kinds of learning we're in. And that's the invitation for everybody who's watching along on this channel. That's the invitation. You are a walking dialectic, whether you like it or not. Now, you can allow yourself to be a slave to the whims of your what we call family curse, or your inherited problems, and play out your life a dialectic of this, your false beliefs of the self. So you'll keep repeating the same problems you've repeated your whole life, that you inherited through your family, that themselves inherited through their culture, and so on, all the way back to caveman days. You are a walking dialectic. Or you can pick up this game and be a walking dialectic like Socrates, play out the implications of knowing the truth. But you also have to free yourself from this. You can't do both. You can't simultaneously be a great vet and still hold on to the childish belief that cats are boys, cats are girls, and dogs are boys, and cats marry dogs. That's how kittens and puppies get made. They are incompatible. You have to sacrifice one. And that's the invitation. Now, formally, in the text we've been reading, we've seen Pierre run into our friend Joseph Campbell. I don't think I can search. Okay, let's not do the search function. Yeah. Joseph Campbell was the guy who made the book A Hero of a Thousand Faces, and he recognized there seems to be an archetypal hero's journey that we all follow. Here we go. Yes, Carl Jung also got into archetypes, but left the dialectic behind. Where is it? It's important that we see it in the text. Have I gone past it? Joseph Campbell, A Hero of a Thousand Faces, gone past it. Here we are, Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces. So one of the, hey, thanks for coming in. Thanks for your questions. Good question. Oh, I'm behind on your chat. Let me quickly check in with your chat. Hi, I'm getting a copy of The Republic in my language tomorrow. Hello. Whoa, good question, Maximus. I'll come back to you, Maximus. Let me check in with Adam before he leaves. When Socrates says, I know XYZ, and Meno says, I know XYZ, what is the context of each? Does Socrates mean yesterday, or does he mean tomorrow? Same for Meno. It's the same sentence, so the meaning for these makes sense within the context. I don't see that. If someone says, I know it, then he's saying, I know it. I don't know why you would add the idea of time. If Socrates said, I knew it yesterday, then you could add that. If he's not putting it in, then I don't see a reason for adding it. Unless, of course, it should be added because of the context of the text. And he missed it out, and he's saying, hey, you fill in this puzzle. Otherwise, no, you don't need the context there. I don't see it. Yeah, you're adding in the idea of time. So no, it's not important there. If someone said, I know what time it is, or I know what I want to eat for lunch. Oh, do you know it yesterday, or do you know it today? What are you doing? It's not necessary to bring that in. Do you mean you know it for me or for you? Well, no, I'm me. I said these words. That's what reading is. You couldn't capture it at all. Okay. I disagree. And if you disagree with something in particular, point out what you disagree with. Otherwise, you're just saying, I prefer my false opinions to reasoned understanding. As I was focusing on writing my reply, I wasn't ignoring your comments, and you were speaking very fast. I do speak fast. That's my flow. Yeah, so, I mean, don't let me destroy your question about context. Say more about it. In fact, do a dialectic on it. Do a dialectic on context. If context exists within reading, if it doesn't. Number one, definition, self to itself. How would you define context? Number two, give a demonstration of it. Give an example of how context demonstrates itself in reading. Number three, division. Use divide it up into others to others. What are some examples of how context would be needed in reading Socrates or reading this text we're reading? 4, from these, can you find something that unifies or is most important, that is the synthesis? And then take that conclusion and related analysis back to the start. And then do it for that side A if context does exist as something added that you need to add. Not said by the author, not in the book, not said by Socrates, but you want to add it for some reason. Now, if it doesn't exist, if it's not needed, how would you define reading? How would it demonstrate itself? What would follow? And what conclusion would you make? That's the game. Now, it's a very different game than other philosophical channels because philosophy ain't about opinions. That's philodoxia. Philosophia means wisdom, love of wisdom. Wisdom is understood as, we can learn this, going through the dialectic, which is dianoia, which is a preparation for an experience of what you're focusing on. That's nous. And wisdom somehow requires both of them to be joined together. No one cares about your opinions, ever. That's usually why people have kids, because they're the only ones who care about your dumb opinions. Or you become a boss. The employees have to care about your dumb opinions. Why? Because they're yours. And opinions don't mean understanding. You don't have to be. I have a racist uncle with racist opinions. Who cares? Now, you might find a way of binding together when you meet other racists who share your opinions, but that's not truth. Now, a lot of people think they're philosophers, but they're actually lovers of opinions. And they are the ones we are differing from in this podcast series. So someone will say, oh, these are my religious opinions. Well, these are my scientific opinions. One will be owned. One will get owned. and they'll attack each other and they'll end up hating each other and they'll walk away. They'll just walk away with whatever opinions they started with. This is not what we're doing. That's not philosophy. That's philodoxia. Socrates says that's the opposite of philosophy. So what? What do we do then? Take your opinions, which are certain statements of certainty. I am certain. Like we're reading Meno. Meno comes in, my teacher told me this, and I'm certain, and I'm willing to fight everyone. I paid a lot of money for my degree. I love my teacher. He seems very clever, and I like the amount of praise he gets by acting wise. All this sort of crap. That is attractive to people who don't realize there is such a thing called dianoia and nous. So if there's no standard for truth, then their truth standard is everyone agrees with their opinions. They're a sigma, or they get a lot of subscribers on their website because they're pandering to their opinions, and they get audience locked, and they end up just regurgitating the same racist dumb opinions that appeal to racist dumb people so they get their money. That's philodoxia. We're not interested in opinions. Now, our opinions might be a bit more refined or well-educated, more than these racist right-wing grifters that populate the internet right now. But they're still opinions that no one cares about. That doesn't help anything. What, am I going to agree with you? Yeah, you're right. You know, everything I've been doing for the last 20 years, I'm going to throw out the window because you have an opinion that differs from mine. Who cares what your opinion is? So what do? We take our opinions. We have to move from opinions and image thinking to dianoia, understanding. That's what everyone can be open to. How do we do that? We take our opinions and we turn it into a question. What if this was true? What if the subject exists? Do I have a better... Here we go. This is the dialectic. Get rid of this. The dialectic has two parts, two categories. What if my opinion... So take your opinion and say, what if it exists in being? What does that mean? If it's an opinion, then it's not, who cares? But if it's a true principle, we think our opinions are true because they exist in being. They are a true principle. Take your opinions and say, if my opinion exists in being, now you're in a different game. It's a hypothesis. It's not certain. You can't be certain in the physical world. You just can't. Even scientific theories are just theories.
But hey, that's just a theory.
You can't prove it. So it's unjust. It's wrong to say, oh, I'm certain. Well, no, you're not certain. It's a theory. You might have sufficient scientific reason and evidence to trust it, but you're only at the level of trust in the physical world. Now, we want to go beyond the physical world. That's the game of metaphysics. That's the game of philosophy. That's the human game. We're not just physical creatures. We have soul, psyche, mind, spiritual experiences. There are principles that even our physical world follows. So that means it has to exist in being, what our friend said called ontology, the study of being. So if you care about your opinions, you must think it's a true principle and has a universal existence, not in the physical world of adjectives, a beautiful thing, a just person, a example, but is the beauty, the justice. That's a principle. So if you are sharing your opinions, you think it's a principle. So if that's the case, then say it properly. Take your opinions, translate it into this. If X, my opinion, exists as a principle, eternal in being, this is how you would define it. So now I go, okay, yeah, I understand that definition. Now, if you define it, that might be enough. Oh yeah, just that definition shows me that it has to exist. I'm with you. That's the end of the conversation. Or we can go on to a deeper question. But that's not enough. Sometimes you have to give a demonstration of what you just defined. Can you give me an example? Oh, here. That's sufficient. Now I'm with you. What next? Now, sometimes that's not sufficient. You have to give division, a set of arguments of what follows, or the impossibilities that follow if it's not the case. From those examples or divisions, you come to a conclusion about the principle, that synthesis, and then you take that principle and you apply it back to the definition to come to a new conclusion, a new hypothesis. Now, everyone can share in that. Everyone can be curious, everyone can follow the steps of reasoning, and if your opinion happens to be true, you've gone from opinion to understanding, and you've brought your friends along, and you've demonstrated through reason and understanding how it has to be the case. You've changed people's minds, and you've developed your own psyche and soul and self through understanding. But also, you have to do part B. What if X doesn't exist? What would follow? How would you define it? If beauty doesn't exist, you would define it as a mirage or just an opinion. How would it demonstrate? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. How would you divide it up? The modeling industry of beauty is a scam. There is no difference between ugliness and beauty. Actions that we call ugly and beauty are just the same as each other. Therefore, there's no difference between right and wrong. Therefore, come to a conclusion. Therefore, beauty is an illusion. Really, everything is exactly beautiful and ugly, and it's all a con. Therefore, the definition of beauty is not just illusion. We take our conclusion back. Beauty is an illusion and a con. That's a quick example of what example of a dialectic of your opinion might look like. Now, you're not going to be good at it to start off with. This is not taught in schools, even though explicitly Socrates says this is the exercise of philosophy. This is how you read properly. Parmenides says this is what you have to do, Socrates, if you're ever going to reach the truth. Time and time again, Socrates and his teacher says this. It's not taught. I've only met one teacher of philosophy who's ever taught it. He happens to be the guy who wrote the Philosophical Midwifery book and has adapted this very same principle to not only turning our opinions into true understanding, but applied it to our problems too. That's how brilliant this is. Simple. 2 parts, 4 categories, simple, simple, simple. And only 2 terms in a dialectic, self and other. So simple. You only need 2 to realize 1. Isn't that great? Just like in the Parmenides. You have to do the second hypothesis to get what you need to really understand the first. But that's a different story for a different day. So everyone in this channel, that's what I encourage you to do. I know it's going to be different. Usually we come in with our opinions and hopefully everyone agrees with your opinions already and they pat you on the head, they say you're clever and you join the club. Or they disagree and you'll feel righteous. Oh, I told those idiots. Now I'm off to find people who already think the same way I do. No one changes, no one is better. Everyone stays in the same opinions that they grew up in, the family and culture and religion they grew up in. Everyone stays stuck in their fate. No one learns anything. You completely ignore your purpose. 2, learn the dialectic, applying it to your problems, or another way of saying that, as a human being, you live out your problems, which is this side of the dialectic, the self that isn't true, the one that says you're inadequate, the one that says that you can't do this, the one that says that you can't find the logos and discover the meaning of life and reach being. That's your life. Everyone's. But also we're here to learn, the dialectic, but the other half, part A of the dialectic is why we read Socrates. You're here to remember the truth about self and reality that you get through jnana yoga. Understanding yoga. That's the method. So no one teaches this at school. It needs to be taught in school. If you're new to this channel, this is what we're encouraging you to do. It's going to be weird. It's going to be different. It's going to be uncomfortable. That's why you need courage. Courage is following what needs to be done, even though it doesn't feel true. My heart says it wants to be this thing. Everyone in my family believes it's this way. How can I do this thing even though I understand this other thing is true? That's courage, to follow the logos even if it's not feeling true. That's courage. That's the virtue. And it's a different game, and it's going to be weird, and you're not going to get it right. But the good thing is we have a Discord channel you can join and practice and share. Like a couple of days ago, we had a couple of dialectics shared by Des. He didn't get it right. That was fine. In fact, it was great that he didn't get it right, because then we got to do a dialectic on his dialectic, and he came up with new insights and questions and deeper, bigger questions and insights and seeing. That's the game. You're not supposed to be right. So if you come in with your opinions, oh, I'm right, well, who cares? You're right. Well, what about all the things you're not right about? As long as you keep pretending to be right because that's what society rewards, you're not in the game. Why would you be here if you already had it all figured out? You are a walking dialectic. And if we are here to master the dialectic, as Socrates saying we are, and therefore we have to test to see if he's right. We don't know if he's right. That's integrity. We have to roll the dice, take a risk, try it. Then this is what we're here to do. And that's how you do it. Take your opinions, practice it in a dialectic, share it with your friends, and oh, hang on a second, we can all share in an if, because that's a question. We can all follow reasoned understanding. We don't have to just already agree with your conclusions. That's what's that called? Tribalism, jingoism, racism, prejudice. I already agree with your opinions. Who cares? This is what we're encouraging people to do. Transform opinions into the dialectic. That's movement up. Now, formally, that's in the Republic. He calls that the divided line. This movement, in the chat, we were talking about, somebody brought up the idea of, oh, look at this mess down here. Someone brought up the idea of ontology. That's the study of being, but it has a partner, which is another fancy word, epistemology, which is how you can understand things. So this ladder represents realm of being. Let's write that down. This ladder represents being, or ontology, space, ontology, and epistemol, and ways of thinking. And that's called epistemology. Ontology and epistemology. Epistemology is represented in the Republic in Plato's divided line, which we're going to get into. Epistemology, and we'll probably get into in this book too. Mol og. That's ways of thinking. So this ladder, we have different states of mind, or ontology, when we experience being. Actually, we should make this yellow. But also, to do that, you also have to be developing your understanding to open yourself up to different states of mind. That's epistemology. And what we just talked about just then, epistemology. Taking your opinions, which is a low form of epistemology, putting it in the dialectic to develop understanding, is going up the ladder of epistemology. So that's what we're doing. Practicing our, using the dialectic to move up the ladder of epistemology, ways of thinking, which opens you up to different states of mind, or ontology, or dimensions of reality, or states of consciousness, or spiritual enlightenment. Reaching our ultimate goal to go beyond all of that to know the self. And as we do that, we're going to have blocks. And that's why we're reading this text. Because it's going to serve as blocks. Because the function of blocks is to specifically block that. This is called the logos. This is called the pathologos. It is specifically against the logos. That's why we're in the game. So anything to, don't, hey, you're a realist. I love this. People say, oh, no, I don't want to do this. I already agree with all of my opinions. That's what people say when they say I'm a realist. I'm a realist. What does that mean? Well, I agree with all of my opinions. Now, that can give you a sense of pleasure or whatever, and it might give you a way of being and a role within your family and all that crap. But that's just, every racist person gets a role within their family, gets a feeling of certainty, a feeling of superiority over another racist. It's just the same kind of principle applied to, it might not be racist opinions, but they're still opinions. That's integrity. It's easier to see in the people whose, opinions are obviously wrong, like racists. But we have to go, okay, if it's the same principles, if they're universal, what are my false beliefs that I think are real, that I'm unwilling to let go of? That whenever I try and put in a dialectic and share with the community in Discord or in the chat or on the comment section, it says, no, don't do that. These are evidence of our blocks that we are here to reflect on with the kind of dialectic that does, as we're reading, it does have the ability to free yourself from the problems and reach your goals, spiritual goals, as was demonstrated in his Pierre's work in the Zen Center. And also, so after that, his work with the Noetic Society in their spiritual and their philosophical goals. So whether it's spiritual or philosophical, it does work. It's been demonstrated to work, and it's been proven in the back of the book. Our job is to make it our own. It's no good just hearing that there's this thing that works and not doing it ourselves. You don't send your slave to the banquet. If there's something that is fantastic and works to solve problems, we want it. We need to master the art. And that's where we are here. Therefore, it was natural that I studied Jnana Yoga. Understanding spirituality. Taoism, one of those states of being where you experience the brilliant light of being. Advaita Vedanta, Kashmir Shaivism, another one of those levels. Buddhism, as well as other wisdom traditions, since they had similar notions. I like Buddhism. Where's my pen? This one here. Buddhism, since they had other wisdom traditions. Let's do that one word. Since they had similar notions and goals as Platonism, similar, same, and different, similar. Let's keep going. Platonic, why is that the wrong color? Let's do this. Platonic philosophy sought the realization and vision of the most brilliant light of being. Wow. As well as, okay, so some traditions, that's the end for them, as well as the realization of the good or the one.
Wow.
So, how many traditions have both? Usually they just pick one. But hey, we are climbing the ladder, so we get to understand all of them and maybe even experience all of them. Why not? Making it a complete spiritual tradition. Let's keep going. And ideas similar to these are expressed in those Eastern systems. So, similar, not the same. Plato, okay, let's keep going. Plato, Plotinus, and Proclus became a bridge I use to cross over and practice these systems. So, Proclus, Plotinus, and Plato, a bridge, or what we might call a ladder, allowing us to understand, incorporate, and cross over all of these systems that we pass along the way. So let's change our catchphrase. A Buddhist and a Taoist cross each other on the path. They don't recognize each other. A Platonist crosses a Buddhist and a Taoist on the path, and he recognizes both and shares a coffee and a lovely dialogue with them. Cheers. So we're making new axioms that will go down in the annals of history. In my practice of the contemplative arts, I had opportunities to explore and test midwifery. In the crises and difficulties I encountered in meditation practice. So, the higher you get up the ladder, the more difficult and the more crises will come up. But hopefully, if you're going through using the logos and the dialectic, you're learning what you need to be able to address those crises and problems. So you could say it's unfair or wrong to have spiritual traditions that don't have the logos, because what if you have a student sitting on the mat for 20 years and on the day that he leaves, he suddenly has an enlightenment experience, he's in that brilliant light of being or something like that, and he walks out into the world. What's going to happen to him? Crises will happen to him. Difficulties will happen to him. Socrates explicitly says this in his texts too. But he has reached a level of enlightenment or state of being without the tools needed to address the crises and difficulties that will inevitably be encountered. So you could say it's unjust to remove logos from your spiritual tradition. And then if somebody from our community goes to a Zen center and says, hey, you might want to add the logos and the dialectic into your tradition, and they say, no, we don't need it. Our tradition is tens of thousands of years old. Say, no, that's wrong of you. This is why. The deeper you get towards your destiny, the greater depth of your problems will surface, manifesting or playing itself out, or division, or a living dialectic of your false beliefs. And if you're not learning the dialectic, you don't have the art needed to address it. So Socrates says you become a ticking time bomb for yourself and society. Socrates' words. Okay? So, hopefully there's a justice to the universe that if we use the logos and the dialectic as our spiritual method, we're gaining the skills to address the difficulties that we come up. That's why we're reading this book. I had confidence in the life of the spirit. What happened? And life of spirit, and not divorced from understanding, okay? Oh, confidence that the life of the spirit is not divorced from understanding. Those of you who are reading our, who are following along in the music series, recognizes this is one of the difficulties learning music. People think you can't have an experience of the magic of music and understand it. Prevents people from actually learning music. It's he calls it a superstition. And we talked about, hey, a lot of spiritual traditions say you can't understand it. It's beyond understanding. You can't know the mind of God. God works in mysterious ways. You can't put words on the Tao, all that kind of stuff. But it's not true. Literally, how is that belief opinion functioning that you can't understand it? Blocking understanding, blocking the logos, which is the function of the pathologos. Boo for pathologos. I discovered for myself, that's what we're doing here. We are discovering for myself that the blocks to our vision operate on all levels of cognitive functioning. Good thing we were just talking about levels of cognitive functioning or epistemology. So in your opinions, they'll function. As you practice the dialectic, they'll function. As you trust the logos, they'll function. So trusting the logos is above that, opinions. As you apply it to the dialectic, dianoia, it will come up. In your experience of nous, or the brilliant light of being that we just talked about, your problems will come up. So all levels of cognitive function, ways of thinking. And those very blocks become the objects of exploration for philosophical midwifery. So that's the good part of the otherwise tragic tale. Because otherwise it would suck. What, the better I do, the more of my blocks will come up and the more difficult they will be? That sounds terrible. Damn you, God. Actually, these very blocks become the objects for exploration for philosophical midwifery. So it's not terrible. You're actually rewarded with problems, because if we are to master the dialectic, not only do you confirm your dialectic in those high experiences, you have to do the negative side, the opposite side. So you are rewarded with problems that you can use as the material to practice the dialectic on side B. What if the self isn't real, or isn't the ultimate, or isn't good? What if the self isn't the one or the good? Inadequate in some way. You stink in some way. You suck in some way. So long as we're in this game, we won't curse the gods for giving us problems as we get better. We cheer because we are in a community that's practicing the dialectic, especially the dialectic applied to our problems. That's midwifery. The struggles one faces during long periods of meditation can be effectively dealt with in philosophical midwifery. So hey, you don't have to sweep up at the ashram for 40 years. You don't have to spend your life sitting on the mat. Why? Because the struggles you face in long periods of meditation can be effectively dealt with in philosophical midwifery. Whatever level midwifery functions on, it is the logos that seeks expression. So that is a kind of conclusion. So all of that we just read, brought to a conclusion with a lovely phrase: whatever level of midwifery that you're doing, what are you doing? It's not even you, it's the logos that is seeking expression. That might be what's really happening here. Hey, if the further we get up that line, the closer we get to self, and if what we just read, the ultimate self is the one or the good self, that must be the first cause for the logos. Therefore, the one or the good self must somehow contain, in some mysterious way, the logos. Then all of the false opinions that you let go of on your journey is anything about the self that's not the good, the one, or the logos. So you might realize the sudden realization we call enlightenment, that we seek by sitting on the mat or whatever yoga we do, might be the realization, I am the one, the good, or the logos. Any particular self or ego is not true. And if I believe it's true, I will play out the crises and difficulties that follow. Meaning, everything that's happening is simply the logos seeking expression. That's what our problems are. That's what our learning is. That's what this game we're playing is. That might be what you are. Now, hopefully that's a question that triggers some sort of excitement and mystery that we can carry with us as we continue to read. Because hey, it's going to be hard to stay loyal to personal opinions and beliefs if we realize that we aren't personal. And we can understand why, and we can prove why by experiencing it. And we recognize the one and the good self, that's me. And you, because it's all self. And what is this journey that we're on? Nothing other than the logo seeking expression, and whatever level of understanding of midwifery we have, do it. Doesn't matter if you're not good enough. It's not you. It's the Logos. The Logos is learning. So don't take pride in your success of your dialectic, but don't take shame or blame either. What can you take? Wonder? Curiosity? Because it's not you, it's the Logos doing it. You don't know what you are. As you discover it when we do philosophy, the dialectic applied to the self, you're learning what it is. And as you jettison, let go of, shed everything else that you believe that you are, that you got from your childhood, you had to learn it somewhere. And, spoiler alert, it's not true. Of course it's not true. They're not enlightened teachers. You might realize that there might not even be a separate ego self. That's inadequate. That's small. That's less than the one or the good itself. That's something less than the Logos. And the greater we understand that and experience that and rub the two together, it's no good just having experiencing without understanding. No good understanding without experiencing it. But having the both together, an integration, a kind of wisdom that we're developing, that we are ultimately the one or the good. And this journey is nothing other than the Logos inherent in us, the one or the good self, seeking expression. So play the game. Whatever level of midwifery you're on, try it, play it, all the time. Over coffee with your friends. we did the coffee instead of coffee. And there's no risk. Why? Because you're in the game anyway. What, are you going to just play out the implications of a false dialectic, or are you going to look at it and remove what's false and learn what's true? In other words, you're in the game anyway. You're in the video game anyway. What, are you going to run around in circles and hit yourself on the head? Or are you going to learn the rules of the game and play well? But also, no risk because you can't take praise for it. You think in 10 years when you get really, really good at the dialectic or midwifery, you're going to look back in what you did today and say, oh, I was really great back then. You go, no, that wasn't even me. I don't even recognize that guy. So what's the praise go to? What's the blame go to if you screw up? The Logos has got to start somewhere. It's got to unfold from somewhere. Whatever level midwifery functions on, it is the Logos that seeks expression. No praise, no blame, just wonder, exploration, fun, joy, sharing. Join the Discord community. Share it with your friends. What a game we're in. So let's end it there. Let's check in with chat before we leave. I'm a bit behind in the chat. Apologize. But sometimes we get into a bit of a flow. Right. Yes, Adam. Yes, you need to get what the terms mean exactly. Important to have the Greek underneath so we can look it up for ourselves. That's why we read the Balboa. Hi, Maximus. Welcome to the chat. Oh, I've already read this. You're getting if you're still there, Maximus, copy of the... In my language, there's no direct translation for self. Could you tell me the different levels of self mentioned in the dialogues? Oh, that's a good question. That's a fantastic question. I recommend getting the Balboa translation of the Republic and read that alongside whatever else you read, because the Balboa has the only accurate translation and has the Greek that you can look up. You can find it for free if you Google Balboa Republic, or join the Discord and ask it and someone will share it with you. The different levels of self. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. We've talked about that a lot. But we run out of time to talk about it now. But if you go back through any of the previous episodes, you'll find us talking about that. Hey, yo. Turns out Platonist student was vegan. Okay. How do you get rid of the anger that comes up? That's what we're learning. Anger is a big part of philosophical midwifery. Family curse being like a werewolf. Yes, you can mythologize what you learn in the Logos within stories, characters, to remember. They're like mnemonic devices, and also share to make a werewolf story. Thanks, Adam. I'm glad you came along, and thanks for your questions. Really important. Con means okay, doing the work. Jed, yes. My opinion is my favorite thing. My dad passed it down to me, and it's been in the family for as long as my family has existed. Very funny. Yes, that's the difficulty. We love our opinions. Oh, especially if mama and papa give us a pat in the head, and our uncles and aunties, they give us a thumbs up whenever we do whatever our family does. But it's not hard to look at a racist family and say, how come you're still doing it? Well, I'm considered the best in my family because I'm the most racist. But dude, who cares what they think? Me! I love my family! So yeah, good point. Need patience and take things slower to put this dialectic in execution. Yes, good point. Patience. That's one of the virtues, by the way. It's hard for most people. It's more easy to shoot opinions until someone gives up. Yes. You're right. It's more easy. It's more comfortable. They're familiar with it. They've had training. Absolutely. We have to sacrifice what's comfortable for what's true. That's the practice of courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice. Things that we will learn more about when we get into the Republic. What? Not the color of our skin. Yes, we are what we say and do. Very nice. Not the color of our skin, the brand of our watch, or the Bugatti we drive. What color is your Bugatti? Then I can dismiss your opinion. Okay. Just more fuel for the love of knowledge. I'm glad. Thanks for sharing that, Maximus. And I hope you have fun. And I'm glad you have a love, because that's needed. That's Aphrodite, the inspiration, the love, the desire for love of knowledge. Surf that wave. Let it carry you through the difficulties that we also will address in midwifery. I will compare the two while reading. Oh, good. Yes. And there will be other episodes where we go into depth about the difference in the self. And but if I see you next time and you have the same question, we can jump into it. Self can be seen as a thing, as what it is, without addition of others to it by itself. Yes, self to self. Interesting. So that's a good point. So we were talking about going through these stages of development to reach the self. And Des pointed out, if we look at this as a dialectic, then another way you could say is, when we reach the top, we are seeing the self without the addition of any others, but just by itself. So that's a fun way of using the dialectic to look and to make sense of the spiritual quest. And also to make sense of all spiritual traditions. Maybe you'll find the different spiritual traditions in one of these other categories. Which one is Buddhism? Which one is Taoism? Which one is Kashmir Sufism? These are questions we carry until we see it. How do you deal with anger? Anger is evidence of an injustice. We are all angry. Why? Because we all suffered an injustice when we were learning this stuff. When we learned our pathologos, we were in a certain high state of self, somewhere up here, functioning in a good way, usually having fun, being free, and then our parents or our parental surrogates, whose job it is to teach us the way of the world, came in and said, no, no, no. We were unable to use the logos. It was a danger to use the logos and ask questions, usually at that time. But this was an injustice because it was wrong. It wasn't true. It was that family curse. They're trying to make you a werewolf just like them. So that is the cause of our anger that we carry. Until we address it, we'll end up projecting it onto others that resemble how they looked when they did it to us. So you might find yourself walking past 20 people in a day. They'll say 20 different things. But the one person who says that one thing that touches your bruise, that triggers your pathologos because they say something or they look a certain way when they say it that seems true because it reminds you of that your teacher, your first teacher, who doesn't have the truth of being but has the image of being, appears to be wise or knowing. When they look like them, that's what'll piss you off, make you angry. And we'll find we have like a radar on our heads. We will find ourselves, you go to a party with like 50 people, you will find yourself attracted to the person who resembles your ma and pa or whoever was your surrogate parents. It's like we're attracted to each other, almost as if there is an intelligent force working throughout the universe guiding us to need to address our problems. They're who you'll be attracted to, who you'll be your friends with, who you'll date and marry, because they're your images of beauty. But until we address the injustice, we'll carry an anger that we will play out. So anger is evidence of a pathologos surfacing or being triggered. What do? How do we deal with it is the question in the chat. Take notes of it. How does it feel? Use as many descriptive words as you can. The more you practice, the better you'll get at it. Why? Because it's the logos seeking expression. The logos, you put the words you put on your state of mind. Use metaphors, analogies as well. Everything you've been learning in this series, in either the music, the philosophy, or the midwifery series, use all of it to blow up, to magnify your state of mind. What does it feel like? Also, any words that come up. You are a fathead. I keep calling people I'm angry at fatheads. Fathead is a weird peculiarity of my logos, peculiarity of my pathologos, not the self logos. I've never heard Socrates call someone a fathead. But look for idiosyncrasies, particularities, uniquenesses in your language. And as a midwife, we try and pull them out of others. Today we've been talking about reading without changing the text. Reinterpreting or adding context is often a buzzword used to change. Now, there could be a case made where there are some times that it isn't, and probably that's the case, but most of the time it's used to not read what's there. But we need to get what's there. Same thing in midwifery. When you said a fathead, no, within the context you're saying, oh, he's dumb. No. Keep fathead. Don't change it. Because it's a clue. It's a clue about a particular scene in which we learnt it. There'll be a lineage to that use of fathead. So, same with states of mind. There'll be a history in your states of mind. So whenever you're angry, take notes of the feeling states, the states of mind. Use everything you've been learning in philosophy to put words on it beautifully, accurately, justly, with courage. And make sure you've wrote it down somewhere in a notebook or in a document, because that's the material we're going to be using in midwifery as we go further. So anyone listening, the same thing. Look for people that trigger your anger in relationships, at work, at play, walking down the street. Because you need to be collecting the terms and the material to apply the dialectic to in midwifery. Just like when we read, we do it without any interpretation or context, just the thing that's there. Because we need to gather the material that we can use to put it into a dialectic. That's our movement up towards our destiny. We're doing both. Only the particular pathologos you have to get from yourself. If you have friends, bring them into the game.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
If you have a partner, talk about your dreams, your problems, whatever, as much as you can. And have fun playing the game of letting logos seek expression in the organization of that in the dialectic as best you can. Now, the more we get into the midwifery book, the better we'll get in figuring out specifically how to use the dialectic on that material. But start wherever you are, whatever level of midwifery you're on, whatever understanding of the dialectic you have, do your best. It's the logo seeking expression. As we go further, we'll get better at it. Must have been ready to receive it. Right. Criticism of self is not perfect enough. Yes. You don't even have to get the anger at other people. It can be your own self-talk. In other words, you could be playing that same role of that original teacher to yourself without them even having to be in the room. You're such a good teacher to the early. You're such a good student to that early teacher that you can do it without them even being there. Absolutely. Criticism of the self, right. And the more we learn about the self in philosophy, the more we can recognize things that are not true. Anything that says it's not one or not good or not logos. Ultimately, that's where we're heading in philosophy, to understand why that's the case. So anything that deviates from what we're learning about the nature of self and reality, any diminishment, any inadequacy, is evidence of a block. By definition, that's why we have to do philosophy, so we can recognize blocks. Otherwise, you'll call yourself a fathead, and if you're not doing philosophy to move from opinions through to understanding, to knowledge, to wisdom of the oneself, you'll be like, oh yeah, I am a fathead. That's right. And you'll stay stuck in your problems. I agree with all of my own opinions. You have to be in philosophy too, to be learning the truth, to be able to recognize what is false. That's the paradigm. That's why when people come into this channel, hey, why don't we read Nietzsche? Or why don't we read Kant? Why don't we read Hegel? Why? Because we don't have the paradigm yet. Once we have the paradigm of true understanding or dianoia, then we can apply it to Kant and Hegel and Aleister Crowley and J.R. Tolkien and the Harry Potter texts, anyone. But without the paradigm, we won't be able to recognize what's true and false, what's their highest vision and understanding, and what's their problem. It's worth doing, by the way, because certain figures like Hegel and Kant and Nietzsche have had, Adam Smith, have had a huge impact on our society for the negative, extremely negative, because it's against the logos. So it's worth understanding how and why they missed the mark so we can remedy it as a society and within ourselves, because like it or not, we're influenced by capitalism and the religion of our time and so forth. But we need to know the paradigm. Not only to experience truth and integrate it, but to recognize what's false, to give us material for this midwifery. You do the both together. I started already. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for joining me in the chat. Some new chatters today. That's been really fantastic. New kinds of questions. That's been really cool. New perspectives. We all start in the level of ignorance and opinions. So everyone comes in from a new starting point. That's fun to see. And it's universal. So while, so we had someone from the academic tradition, studied philosophy, got a degree or something. Now, you listening might not be from that background, but there might be a lot that you can recognize, as we read in the text. Even the particular personal problems that we explore, we might find a universal application to. We might find a universal principle, a way of applying it to ourselves too. So thank you for being honest and sharing your opinions, and I'm sure we can all get something from that to whatever level. And so, yes, so fantastic, optimistic, exciting, moving forward. And now that we have this conclusion that even in long periods of meditation, even those like closest to those enlightenment experiences, even those can be effectively dealt with the midwifery. Whatever level you're on, it's just a logo-seeking expression. Wow.
Wow.
Where is he going to go from there? Oh, it's going to be exciting. Cliffhanger. On that cliffhanger, thank you for joining me. Thank you everyone from the chat. Like, subscribe on YouTube. Follow on Twitch if you like. Join the Discord. Share your insights, your dialectics, your midwifery. Practice turning your opinions into dialectics and sharing. See what happens if you do. We also get notifications when we go live. If you want to support on Patreon, greatly appreciated. And there should be a donate somewhere if you wish to donate to the channel to help keep it alive. Thank you so much. I hope to see you next time, full of questions and material to practice midwifery on. Exciting stuff. We're in the game. Thank you so much for joining. And excuse my fast talk to those in the chat who English isn't their native language.